Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. And exactly 1 month from today, the 2025 Big Ten college football season is going to kick off. And I'm here to tell you everything you need to know about Big Ten football this fall, folks. This is the Big Preview on Big Nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
Big Ten Football Media Days is in the books from last week, and man, when I was watching that coverage on the Big Ten Network, they're talking about offenses and how much depth are they going to have, and they're talking about defense, and they're talking about ball, and they're talking about all these things, and I'm getting excited. It is the most conflicting time of the year because, you know, I say don't wish summer away, right? It's a beautiful time of year, but man, we are getting so close to the start of the college football season. When we turn the page, when month number 7 on this day turns into month number 8, we're going to kick things off on that Thursday night with 4 Big Ten college football games. Now, you can go to your favorite team podcast, or you can go to a Rivals podcast, or a team that's on your schedules podcast. If you need recommendations, hit me up. I certainly can lead you in the right direction of really the detailed, in-depth, position-by-position, second-teamer, third-teamer, kicker, punter, all those things. Like, you can go to those places for that. But here, right now, everything you need to know about all 18 teams here in the Big Ten for the 2025 season. What is the first thing that you need to know? It's not about a defending champion. It's not about who's going to make it to the playoff this year. It's about the conference as a whole, folks. The best play within the Big Ten Conference. I don't think there is any doubt about that. This conference has housed the last 2 national champions. Michigan went undefeated in 2023. Of course, Ohio State making that great postseason run last season on their way to the national championship. Their first national title in 10 years in Columbus, Ohio. I think that this run for the Big Ten really started towards the end of the 2023 season when you had the future Big Ten member and the future SEC member, Pac-12 champion Washington defeated Big 12 champion at the time, Texas, in the semifinals. Of course, Michigan beating Alabama that year as well. And then, of course, this year, right? 2 Big Ten teams in the college football playoff semifinals. And you look at the last 2 years, 3 current Big Ten members of the 4 have played for the national championship, and the one that was not in there probably should be a Big Ten team anyway, the Notre Dame in there as well. The Big Ten 5-1 versus the SEC in postseason games last season. I just don't think there's any doubt that this 9-game grind is the most difficult in college football as opposed to the 8-game schedule that the SEC plays on their hand. But I want to talk about that grind for just a minute. Like, if you think you're a great team, if you're Penn State this season, if you're Oregon this season, if you're Ohio State this season, if you're Illinois this season, if you're a team with a lot of expectations, you're not going to roll through this schedule. That's what you need to know. Not every game's going to be easy. Look at some of the best teams last year. Ohio State, remember that struggle against Nebraska? Remember the loss? Of course, everybody remembers the loss at the end of the season against Michigan. Oregon squeaking out a win on the road at Wisconsin in November. Penn State needed a fake punt late in the game to extend a drive to be able to beat Minnesota on the road. They needed overtime to beat USC as well. Like, these are great teams. Last season, national champion, Big Ten champion. These are great football teams that played 6-6 teams. They played Wisconsin as a team that went 5-7, and that's just the grind that the Big Ten is. Not every week you're going to have your best every single time that you step onto the football field. This thing is an absolute grind, and if you are sitting there as a middle 5, 6, 7 win type of team, it is going to be tough every single week. It is going to be a close game every single week, and you need to prepare for that. But that's why we love watching this league, is because it is competitive football on a week-by-week basis. When we start to dive into some of these team previews in the Big Ten, you got to start with the big boys. There are 3 teams at the top of the Big Ten that I think are clearly deeper, that are clearly more talented, that are clearly the contenders. When we talk about the Big Ten winning their 3rd consecutive national champion, these are the 3 teams I think that we're thinking of. The Penn State Nittany Lions, the Ohio State Buckeyes, and the Oregon Ducks. You're talking about the defending national champion in Ohio State. You're talking about the defending Big Ten champion in Oregon. And you're talking about the team that is predicted to win the Big Ten this season, and that is the Penn State Nittany Lions. Let's begin with James Franklin and the Penn State Nittany Lions. You know, when you talk about James Franklin, what's the first thing that comes up? Guy can't win the big game. Guy can't win the big game. He can't get over that hump. He's a really good coach, but he's maybe not a great coach. Well, this year, if it's not now, it might not ever happen in Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, because this is a year where Penn State is absolutely loaded. They are bringing everybody back. They are in the mold of 2023 Michigan before them. They are in the mold of 2024 Ohio State before them, where they have a clear motivation, they have a clear purpose, and they have a whole ton of experience returning, and they might have the best group of coordinators in college football. You already had Andy Kotelnicki, who proved what he can do with this offense last season, calling plays. And then, you just steal Jim Knowles, maybe the best defensive coordinator in all of college football, from the Ohio State Buckeyes. A star-studded coaching staff. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Now, when we talk about these returning players and everybody running it back one more year to try to bring that championship to Central Pennsylvania, you start, of course, with the quarterback, Drew Aller. He was 3rd in the Big Ten in passing last season. He's the top returning passer in the conference, over 3,200 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. I think the thing that I want to see from Drew a little bit more this year is just that great to elite level consistency. I want him playing towards that Heisman type of level every single time that he goes out on a college football field. We've seen him play really good games throughout his career, specifically last season, but then you see some of these games like last year against Ohio State, right, where he just couldn't get anything going. A lot of credit goes to the Buckeye defense, Jim Knowles, during that specific contest. But what do we know? If Penn State wants to get over that hump, you play against a really good opponent, or Penn State's going to play 2 of them, home against Oregon and at Penn State this year. You need to show and you need to prove that you can beat them, that you can make the plays in crunch time to be able to make that happen. And it all starts with the quarterback as the leader of the offense. Drew Aller needs to be that guy, certainly. I think Drew Aller is a lot in the mold of J.J. McCarthy in 2023, where this is going to be a very physical type of offense. They're going to lean on the run game, but that quarterback's going to have to make big plays down the field when they absolutely need them to be made. I talked about leaning on the run game. You would lean on the run game too if you had Nick Singleton and Katron Allen coming back. They both rushed for over 1,000 yards last season, combined for 20 touchdowns. I think if these guys were on separate teams, they'd probably both be Heisman candidates. I think they're that good. They're extremely talented running backs, but I think a reason why they're going to be great once again in this rushing attack is going to be great once again is you're returning 4 starters up front on the offensive line. Guys like Nick Dawkins at center, Nolan Rucci, Anthony Donkow, right, was a young guy that really played a lot of size, certainly up front. It is going to be very difficult for opposing defensive lines this year to be able to kind of match leverage with this group up front on the offensive line. Going to the passing game. Last year, it was all about the tight end position. It was all about Tyler Warren. And, of course, now he's playing in the National Football League. Over 1,200 yards and 8 scores last season. And I think this year, the passing game really has to. It has to transfer from being tight end centric. Now, Jaleel Dankins, Luke Reynolds, they're certainly going to be involved in this offense, but it's got to transfer over to these wide receivers able to get open consistently and make plays. Harrison Wallace is gone. He's transferring to Ole Miss. Amari Evans is gone. He's transferring to Washington. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Julian Fleming was a great perimeter blocker, and that's about it. So you lose those three guys. You go to the portal. That's exactly what Penn State needed to do at wide receiver to try to replace that. Trevor Pena comes over from Syracuse. He was a part of the college football's best passing offense last year with the Orange over there. Over 900 yards and 9 touchdowns in that offense. Kyron Hudson, a veteran sure-handed receiver from USC. Over 400 yards, 3 scores with the Trojans last year. Devontae Ross is that burner and that perimeter playmaker that they are looking to step up. Over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns at the group of 6 level at Troy last year. These 3 combined for over 2,400 yards and 23 touchdowns at their respective schools. I don't think they're going to put up that type of production. If they put up that type of production, yeah, Penn State's going to be sitting real good, especially with what they got at quarterback with what I mentioned before. But I think like maybe the biggest key to this offense is those 3 wide receivers need to be able to be playmakers, because if you have a defense that can at least go toe to toe with Penn State in the trenches and maybe at least slow down the run game, then the ball gets put into the hands of Drew Aller and this offense. You need to be able to beat you. You need to be able to win in multiple ways. What I said about Michigan, they can beat you any way they choose to beat you. Penn State needs to be able to be that team this season. You go over to the defensive side of the football. I mentioned Jim Knowles is coming in as the defensive coordinator, and he's got a lot to work with, certainly, this season. Now, you're going to lose Abdul Carter to the National Football League, and that is a big loss. He was one of the best pass rushers in college football over the last couple of seasons, but you got Dennis Sutton coming back. 13 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks. Last season. Zane Durant is on that defensive line as well. But the rest of the defensive line, you need to find ways to kind of, you're not going to replicate with one guy what Abdul Carter did. But as a group, I think you need to kind of be able to kind of match that production as best you can up front. But I feel really good about what Penn State has up front on the defensive line. I think the linebacker room is really solid, even despite the loss of Kobe King. Tony Rojas and Dom DeLuca combined for 98 tackles and 10 tackles for loss last season. Amari Campbell transfers in from North Carolina. He's got like 76 tackles, 6.5 sacks last season. So I think that room is really solid. I think it's really good. Right? I feel really good about that one. I feel really good about the first 2 levels. Secondary, like if there's a little bit of a weak point for the Nittany Lions, I think the secondary, you could maybe throw that out there. They lose Jalen Reed, who was their leading tackler at safety, 98 tackles and 3 wpicks. They retain Zakee Wheatley, who was all Big Ten honorable mention last year. A.J. Harris is back yet again at corner. He is all Big Ten third team. I think in the secondary, you're looking for Elliott Washington and Zion Tracy to really be expected to fill the gaps. Elliott made 1 start last season. Zion Tracy made 4 starts last season. So how are teams going? I think teams that are going to have the best chance to kind of go and play well against Penn State are going to be the teams that are going to be explosive on the outside. I'm looking like at a team like an Oregon. I'm looking at a team like an Indiana that could maybe have that type of effect on this Penn State team. But there's no doubt about it. This is I think the team for good reason that's number 1 in the Cleveland.com poll. This is a team that's really deep in a lot of places. This is a team that's really experienced in a lot of places as well. Now it's just up to, can they win the big one? And if you don't do it in the regular season, can you make an Ohio State-style run towards a national championship as well? All right, let's move on to the defending national champions, and let's talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. Boy, when you go out and you win a title, you lose your coordinators, and you usually lose a lot of guys to the National Football League. That's exactly what's happening here with the Ohio State Buckeyes. Let me just list off some of the names, some of the players that they are going to be losing this year. Quarterback Will Howard, running backs Quinshawn Judkins and Trevion Henderson, wide receiver Emeka Ibuka, their entire defensive line, Sawyer, JTT, Ty Hamilton, and Tyleik Williams, Cody Simon, a triple-digit leading tackler, Lathan Ransom in the secondary, deep breath, and the list goes on and on. Their offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, leaves to be the offensive coordinator under Pete Carroll in the NFL with the Las Vegas Raiders. As I mentioned before, defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, he's off to Happy Valley, Pennsylvania. But here's the thing, folks. You wear the scarlet and gray, you put the Buckeye leaves on your helmet. What does that mean? It means you got a lot of depth. It means you got 4-star and 5-star guys on the second team. It means you got them on the third team, and Ohio State is certainly going to get the chance to be able to prove that this season. I think Ohio State is going to be in every single game and is going to have a chance to win every single game on their schedule, which we know are the expectations in Columbus because they have the best 2 players in college football on either side of the coin. Jeremiah Smith is an alien. He is not of this world. Over 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns as a true freshman. Caleb Downs, look at that play that he made in the semifinals against Texas last season. These are 2 guys that can single-handedly impact a game, and that is tough to do. That is tough to do from their positions on a football field. Let's talk about quarterback, because we got a battle going on through spring. We got a battle here going on into fall camp. Julian Sayin is a 5-star quarterback that seems to be the bet that is house money, right? He seems to be the favorite in this group. But Lincoln Kienholz has certainly been able to push him right now. I think either quarterback, it doesn't matter who it is, I could play quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes next season, and I could probably have a pretty good chance to put up some good numbers because you are going to go with the aforementioned Jeremiah Smith to throw the football to. Carnell Tate, over 700 yards and 4 touchdowns last season. You got Brandon Innes, who's he was a top 5 wide receiver in his class when he came out. So he was highly rated, right? We just know how Ohio State just churns out these top level wide receivers. So you are going to have a young quarterback, that's for sure. But when you're able to throw to these types of players, it's going to make you look really good. Maybe better, maybe further along than you actually are at that point in time. But I would favor Sayin to be the quarterback in Columbus, Ohio. And then they have maybe as good of a tight end as they've had in a while. I know they had Cade Stover a couple of years ago, but Max Clare, he was the top tight end in the portal, number 15 overall player in the portal, over 600 yards, 4 touchdowns at Purdue last season. Tall, athletic, pass-catching tight end. So with Clare and Smith and Tate and Innes, I don't know. I do not know how you defend all of these guys on the football field. It is going to be truly pick your poison. So the quarterback just has to be able to make the right decision. He's got to be able to make the quick decision. So I think whoever is able to do that best through in fall camp is probably going to be named the starter when they play the Texas Longhorns to kick off the season. Ohio State loses 3 starters up front on the offensive line, but brought in 2 really good transfers. Some of those started. McLaughlin, of course, he was kind of banged up last year. Donovan Jackson, Josh Fryer as well. They bring in Phillip Daniels, who transfers in from Minnesota. Ethan Anianwa, hope I got that right, transfers over from Rice. So this is an offensive line when they had to go through some injuries. They shuffled some things around, had some troubles, but they finally got it together. The offensive line's ability to give Julian Sayin and these wide receivers routes time to develop is going to be an X factor, certainly, for this offense as well. I expect the Buckeye offense to be a lot more lenient and really lean more on the passing game. Because you got Brian Heartland is now going to be the offensive coordinator. He was the wide receivers coach. That's one. I just talked about the wide receivers and the immense talent that they have at that position, right? Those are their best players on offense and their best chance to put up points. And then when you look at the running backs, with Henderson and Judkins gone, you got James Peoples coming in. C.J. Donaldson transfers over from West Virginia, who's kind of more of a power back, hasn't rushed for over 1,000 yards in a season in his career. I think it's going to be more of a compliment, to be honest with you, when you look at this passing game. So offense, it's going to be explosive, but if this is a team that if you have defenses that can get after the quarterback, shorten the amount of time that they have for these routes to develop, maybe that could be a way to combat this offense a little bit. Knowing the run game isn't going to be as strong, most likely. Defense. Matt Patricia, the former New England Patriots defensive coordinator, the former Detroit Lions head coach, is coming into this thing. And I think when I start to look at the defense, I really like the secondary. Caleb Downs. What more can you say? An all-American player. He's a player that can, he's probably the best safety in college football. He's the best safety in the Big Ten in a conference loaded with really good safeties at the top. Davis Anigbenosin is back. He was an all-Big Ten honorable mention last year. Jermaine Matthews is coming back as well, and he was one of those guys that was just kind of a second-team guy last season. Could have started on a lot of teams in college football, but he's been waiting his turn, and he's going to get the opportunity to really show what he can do. Keep an eye out for Devin Sanchez. He was the number 6 recruit in the country. He's a true freshman. Look, Jeremiah Smith certainly played a lot as a true freshman as well, but you got to be really good to play. I think Devin Sanchez is really good, and I think that he can certainly do that this season. They lose their leading tackler, Cody Simon, from the middle of the defense. He was a big part of that group. Sonny Styles, now is time for him to step up and be that linebacker leader that we've seen out of Ohio State recently. Remember Tommy Eichenberg, somebody like that. Arvell Reese and C.J. Hicks have opportunities to emerge. C.J. Hicks, he was a 5-star, top 20, 25 recruit. Maybe he was higher than that coming out of high school, and we haven't heard much from him. So we'll see if he can make some noise coming off the edge as well. It's going to be insanely difficult to replicate this experience on the defensive line that they're losing. The Sawyers, the JTTs, the Tylik Williams, the Ty Hamiltons that I talked about before. These are multi-year starters. Remember, what was that, 2 or 3 years ago, that JTT crazy game at Penn State? That seems like a lifetime ago, but it just shows you how long that him specifically and others have been involved in this defensive line rotation at a high level. Caden McDonald, Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry. Those guys are juniors and seniors that have played in the rotation, and they've seen some time. Bo Atkinson transfers in from North Carolina off the edge. He had 8 sacks last season. The defensive line was such a huge part to Ohio State's success. The defensive line holding up in that last drive against the Texas Longhorns. That was certainly huge to them being able to be able to advance and eventually win the national championship game. So, and we know the secondary is going to be very good, but that defensive line has got to find a way to. They're not going to be as good as last year. I think that's pretty obvious, but they've got to find a way to certainly be able to wreak some havoc this season. I'm really intrigued. I got a ton of belief in the offense for Ohio State. Defense is intriguing. It's very interesting, certainly to me, with all of the production that they are losing. No doubt Ohio State will be one of those top teams in college football, possibly contending for a Big Ten or maybe a second straight national championship. Let's move on to the West Coast, and let's talk about that team out west. Let's talk about the Oregon Ducks. Dan Lanning, he just keeps improving. Year after year after year, this is a team that just keeps on increasing their win total from 10 to 12 to 13 last year, running through the Big Ten Conference. But this year is going to be a test for the Ducks to see exactly how elite the Oregon program is and how well they can reload. This is really the first year where it's going to be a lot of Dan Lanning, heavily recruited guys on this roster. How has their talent evaluation been? How has their development been? We're going to find out a lot about that this year up there in Eugene. Now, I think the big news coming out of this spring in the Oregon news cycle was the injury to Evan Stewart. Evan Stewart was a receiver last year, over 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's going to set the Ducks back a little bit. And now you're going to have a wide open competition outside of DeCorian Moore. More on the Super Frosh here in a little bit as we continue talking about the Ducks. But now you're going to have all sorts of opportunities to be able to step up, and maybe some questions at wide receiver out there because, not only Evan Stewart, but you lose your other top 2 wide receivers, Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden. They combined for over 1,600 yards and 15 touchdowns. That's a lot of production to replace as well. All right, so let's talk about DeCorian Moore a little bit. We talked about Jeremiah Smith earlier, Ryan Williams at Alabama. These were true freshman wide receiver sensations. And now there is expectations and pressure on DeCorian Moore to be that dude from game number 1. You had Evan Stewart in this lineup. Okay, so maybe DeCorian can be that wide receiver too, and maybe there isn't as much pressure. Now, from day one, a guy that was playing high school football last year at Duncanville High School in the state of Texas, now he's going to be the guy that's going to be expected to be able to make plays right out the gate. You know who else is going to be expected to make plays? Kenyon Sadiq at tight end. This guy is an absolute super freak. He can do it all. He can block. He's gotten involved in the run game. He can catch the ball. He can line the ball. He can line up out wide. He can line up at the typical tight end position. He is going to be a problem. He will be one of the best tight ends in all of college football last year, just over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's taking over for Terrence Ferguson, who had one of the best tight end careers in Oregon Duck history. Top 3 all time in a lot of statistical categories, career and single season. And yet, I think Oregon feels better at the tight end position with somebody like Kenyon Sadiq. Now, when you're talking about, okay, who could be some of those other wide receivers that could really step up for the Ducks? Malik Benson transfers in from Florida State. He had 311 yards and a touchdown with the Noles in Tallahassee last year. You got veteran guys Justice Lowe. Gary Bryant Jr. is a guy that was banged up due to injury last year, but he had over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2023. I think he's a really good candidate to maybe take over for Tez Johnson at that slot position this season. Jeremiah McClellan, Jurion Dickey, Kyler Casper. I mean, these are guys with stars next to their name. Dickey was a former 5-star. McClellan was a former 4-star. I mean, like, these are all really good players. Now it's time for them to step up. It's a next man up mentality right now. Let's move to the quarterback position. Now, there is a quarterback battle going on through spring and now as we venture into fall camp between Dante Moore, the former 5-star and UCLA quarterback, and Austin Novosad, he was a 4-star quarterback of his own. And this is as good of a 1-2 quarterback position, I think, as there is in college football. The heavy favorite is Dante Moore. You've had, the expectations are just, you just got to get to New York City. You got to be a Heisman finalist. That's now what the bar is, operating in Will Stein's offense in Eugene, Oregon. And Dante Moore, I believe, has as high of a ceiling as they've had since maybe Justin Herbert. Do you go with the double M, Marcus Mariota? That's certainly rarefied air when we're talking about Duck quarterbacks. But Dante can do that, and I think he showed a lot of maturity by transferring in last season and sitting and learning. I think his year sitting and learning is going to be more beneficial than his year under Chip Kelly getting experience over there at UCLA. So I think that was a great cleanser last season. Word out of spring says he's got all the tools. He can make all the throws. That the hype is real. But can he do it on the football field? Because the last time we saw him, certainly a lot of inconsistencies his freshman year over there at UCLA. Now, Oregon back-to-back years has a Joe Moore Award finalist offensive lines. They've been great up front up there, but they lose 4 starters up front on this team. And then they went into the portal to get 3 offensive line guys. Josh Connerly Jr. was drafted in the first round of the NFL draft by the Washington Commanders. Ajani Cornelius was on the outside over there at tackle. There's a lot to replace. Iapane Lalaolu in there at center, also known as Pancho, is a guy that they're looking to anchor and is the only returner up front at center on this offensive line. Isaiah World was the top tackle in the transfer portal. They got him from Nevada. People are saying top 10, top 15 pick, maybe in next year's draft for him. Emmanuel Pranon transfers from USC. I think he was probably the best offensive lineman on the Trojans last season at guard. Alex Harkey transfers over from Texas State. I think he's a little bit better of a run blocker than he is a pass blocker, but these are all really big guys. They're all really good. We know when it comes to the offensive line, 5 have to play as one. So you got to be able to gel together. Oregon Duck fans know all about that, where there were kind of some shifting pieces early last season. So that is going to be a tremendous key. But I think these guys are experienced, and maybe it'll take them a little bit. Maybe it'll take them a couple of games. But I think this offensive line has a pretty high ceiling for this year. Now they're going to be blocking for what could maybe be the deepest Oregon running back room, backfield in a while, and that's saying something considering you've had Bucky Irving and Jordan James, who of course is departing. He had over 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns for the Ducks last season. Mekhi Hughes transfers in from Tulane, over 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns the last 2 years at Tulane. He was really the top running back prize in the transfer portal this year. Noah Whittington is back for his final year. He had 540 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. A healthy Noah Whittington, I think, is going to be a really good Noah Whittington. He was kind of recovering from an injury the first half of last year. Keep an eye out for DeJuan Riggs, also known as Dink. He really flashed in that last game against Washington. So I think that this is going to be an offense that is really going to lean on the run game first, but I think they're going to have a hell of a passing attack with DeCorian Moore and Kenyon Sadiq as their main targets in this passing game as well. You flip over to Tosh Lupoi's defense for the Ducks. A lot of people talking about this defense as a top 10 ranked defense in all of college football, and there are guys at all three levels of the defense to be able to back that up. Mateo Uyunglele comes back at defensive end off the edge, led the Big Ten in sacks during the regular season. Bryce Betcher was an all Big Ten linebacker, 94 tackles and 8 TFLs last year. Dylan Thieneman, a former All-American safety, transfers in from Purdue. We talk about the great safeties in the Big Ten. He is right up there as a potential maybe first-round pick. Dylan Thieneman is as good of a guy as they've had at safety maybe since the days of Javon Holland recently. So that's a group that really needed an upgrade. The defensive line is replacing two guys that were drafted in the first 3 rounds of the draft. You're talking about Derek Harmon in the first, Jamari Caldwell in the third. But, man, this defensive line has some size. Amari Washington is coming up. He was in that rotation. He was that third guy in the middle for the Ducks last season. I'd expect him to have close to an all Big Ten season. Bear Alexander transfers in from USC. Can Oregon get the most out of Bear? All the return so far is he's putting in the work that he needs to. Former 5-star at Georgia and USC. If he's playing at that all-conference level, good luck. Good luck against this team. Teon Gray, Terrence Green are other guys that will be in the rotation. They're 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 320, 330. This is a Big Ten defensive line, folks. It might be, as a whole, the best defensive line in the Big Ten Conference right now. The secondary it's completely new alongside Dylan Thieneman. Theron Johnson transfers in from Northwestern. He was an all Big Ten guy there. Ife Obadegwu, Dalen Austin, Kingston Lopa are young players that I think they expect to be able to mold into starters as well. So I think this is a defense. It might take some time for them to kind of get their feet under them, considering how young of a team is. And I think that kind of goes to the offensive side of the ball as well. Oregon, I think, is a team to watch out for when we get to Game 9, Game 10, Game 11 to really start hitting their stride and to really start taking it to that next level. No doubt about it, these 3 teams are the best in the Big Ten. I'd be surprised if, number 1, these teams aren't playing, one of these teams isn't playing in the college football playoff, and number 2, 2 of these teams aren't playing for the Big Ten title. Now, last year, the Big Ten got 4 teams in the college football playoff. I feel good about those 3 that I just talked about, but who are some contenders to get into the college football playoff? That's where my next group of 3 teams comes. I'm not saying that these are the only teams that can make the playoff, but I think these are the teams that maybe roster-wise I feel the best to maybe slide in to that 4th spot for the Big Ten. That being the Michigan Wolverines, Illinois Fighting Illini, and the Indiana Hoosiers. Let's start first with the Maize and Blue. They took a big step down after winning that national championship, a 7-5 regular season and an 8th win in the bowl game. I thought I was watching Iowa on offense. It was that bad. It was making my eyes bleed a little bit, especially at the beginning of the season. Even through the end of the season when they kind of accepted who they were, it was bad. It was not good. They rotated quarterbacks. Alex Orji was in there. Jack Tuttle was in there. Davis Warren was in there. None of it was good. So they had to kind of retool everything. Out is Kirk Campbell as the offensive coordinator. In is Chip Lindsey, who comes over from North Carolina. He's got a little bit more of a spread background, but if you kind of mesh that with Sharon Moore and what he wants to do and the physicality that he wants to install, I think that could create a pretty good mesh. I think that's the best of both worlds. So, quarterback, we need some changes there, and that's what Michigan was able to do. Of course, Bryce Underwood, the flip from LSU, the number 1 quarterback in the country, the 5-star all-everything guy. Now, he was getting some reps certainly in the spring because of an injury to a transfer quarterback that's coming in, and that being Mr. Mikey Keene. He was brought in from Fresno State, over 2,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions last season. Personally, I believe because of kind of what I just laid out, Bryce Underwood getting those reps, I think he has a little bit of an upper hand in this quarterback battle. And it's hard to pay that amount of money and not put him out on the football field right away. But I think eventually, whether it's game 1 or game 6, game 8, whatever, Bryce Underwood is going to take over this team. I think it's just a matter of time, but it is good to be able to have an experienced quarterback in Mikey Keene there as kind of, at the very least, an insurance policy, maybe even somebody else in the room, a peer in the room, so to speak, that Bryce can be able to kind of lean on and learn off of as well. Now, the quarterback position needs to be better. The quarterback position will be better for Michigan this season. But this is still going to be a team that's going to smash. And I think that their backfield is very promising to be able to do that and do that at a high level despite losing Khalil Mullins and Donovan Edwards. You bring in Justice Haynes transferring in from Alabama, former 5-star recruit, very highly touted coming out of high school. He had 440 yards, 7 touchdowns last year with the Tide. Jordan Marshall is a guy that they've liked ever since they've brought him in onto campus, and he really showed what he can do against Alabama in that bowl game. So that's kind of the running back tandem that you should expect in the backfield for the Wolverines this fall. Now, for them to be able to spring some big runs, for them to be able to be as good as they can possibly be, this offensive line needs to play well. I think this offensive line needs to play better this season. That's kind of a question I have. It's just like, how good can this O-line be? Can they push people around as much as they would like to at Michigan? They returned 3 starters up front. Evan Link at left tackle. These are big boys. Like Link is 6'6", 328. Giovanni El-Hadi at left guard is 6'5", 310. Greg Crippen at center is 6'4", 309 guys. Andrew Sprague, a high-profile recruit a few years ago. They expect him to come in at right tackle and be very, very good. So, can this offensive line be better this season? I think returning the handful of starters that they do and then bringing in some of these players that they have in their system, I think they're going to be pretty good. I just don't know how good they're going to be. And, man, those tackles need to be good this year, especially with a true freshman in Bryce Underwood. You don't want him to get hit too much, and then he's out there kind of seeing things and seeing ghosts, and all of a sudden it kind of gets into his head a little bit. So offensive line needs to play well for the Wolverines. Wide receivers last year, I think that was a big problem, as this receiver group could not get open on a fairly consistent basis last season. And I think they've improved. But let's talk about it a little bit. They lost their last top 2 pass catchers last season. Michigan did, that being tight end Colston Loveland and Tyler Morris. Their leading returning receiver failed to break the 150-yard mark last season. They got 2 decent options out of the portal. Gonna need to have a big season from Donovan McCulley. A couple of years ago, when Tom Allen was the head coach at Indiana, remember that, he had 644 yards and 6 touchdowns. That led the Hoosiers at that point. Former quarterback, tall, athletic type of guy. Anthony Simpson, after starting his career at Arizona, he transferred to UMass, put up a big year in 23, 792 yards, 3 scores that year. But 24, not so much with an injury. So those 2 transfers, I think, are essential because I kind of look to the rest of the wide receiver room, the Samaj Morgans of the world, the Fred Moores of the world, the Kendrick Bells of the world, the Peyton O'Learys of the world. They're all back, and they're like solid options, but none of those guys are going to be the receiver. None of those guys really strike fear in defenses, keep defensive coordinators up at night. So those 2 transfers need to really come in and really make a difference right away. But also, I would keep an eye on true freshman Andrew Marsh. He's got an opportunity to, I think, rise up the depth chart really, really quick. Colston Loveland, the loss of tight end. It's a huge loss. Like he was a big part of their championship team as well. 582 yards and 5 scores last year. Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen, Max Bredesen, seems like he's been on this team forever, will each carve out their own roles at tight end. Big targets. Now, on defense, Wink Martindale, back as the coordinator on that side, I'm not sure if there will ever be a combination like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Again, but Michigan is sure they're going to try their damnedest to have another really good and another really deep defensive line. Also lost Josiah Stewart coming off the edge. Derek Moore, Rayshawn Benny, TJ Guy, Cameron Brandt combined for 14 sacks last year. So there's something coming back in terms of pass rush and pressure, and I think that's where Michigan is really going to specialize this season. Moore, Guy, and Brandt. Those are the edge rushers. That's depth. That's really good depth coming off the edge against opposing offensive tackles. Alongside Rayshawn Benny in the middle, Michigan looked to the transfer portal. Damon Payne coming out of Alabama. Trey Williams coming out of Clemson. Also throw in Trey Pierce returning in from last season. And it's a deep group. We know the depth and fresh bodies has been something that Michigan has been able to invest in. I mean, do they have that type of top 5 overall pick type of talent? Like a Mason Graham? Maybe not. But I think they've got depth and a lot of really good players certainly in that room as well. I feel really good about the front 7 for the Wolverines. We go to the linebacker room. Ernest Hausman and Jayshawn Barham, the top 2 tacklers from last season, returned for the Wolverines. They combined for over 150 tackles on 11 TFLs. Jimmy Rodler, Jaden Hood also provide some depth over here as well. Secondary, a little bit of a rough start to last year. And I think once they realize, okay, Will Johnson returning, it's not going to be a thing. I think a lot of guys got their learning experience, and I think they started to figure some things out towards the end of the year. Getting Rod Moore back is going to be huge. He's still kind of going through some rehab. Sounds like he's around 80 to 90% here as we enter fall camp. Jair Hill, Zeke Berry, and others need to step up for this to be an improved group. I think that this is going to be another really good defense. I think it's going to be a top 5 defense in the Big Ten. I think for Michigan to have success this season, it's a lot of the formula that we've been used to, really, with Michigan over the last handful of years. You need to run the football effectively. You need to play great defense. I don't think just because that they've upgraded at quarterback, they're not going to turn into and have a coordinator that has maybe some spread concepts and better offensive numbers. I don't think this is all of a sudden going to turn into an offense where they're going to be lighting it up. Nope, their DNA is going to be their DNA for this season. And and having Bryce Underwood going through those learning experiences, I think is going to make him better towards the end of the year. The schedule really shapes up well where this could be maybe a 9-win team, 10-win team to be able to bounce back into the college football playoff. All right, folks, I think the leader in the clubhouse out of these 3 teams is the team I'm about to talk about next. That's the orange and blue of the Illinois Fighting Illini. I've interacted with some Illinois fans over the years, and they've kind of got, all right, when good things are happening, they're not maybe they're not pumping their fist or whatever. They're kind of looking over their shoulder and saying, okay, now what bad thing is going to happen? So this is a team with high expectations. And maybe some Illinois fans might not know how to react with these types of expectations, but this team's ability to handle those expectations will certainly be crucial. I love the head coach, first of all, Brett Bielema, put on this earth to do one thing and one thing only, coach Big Ten football. But I love the quarterback and I love the offensive line returning for Illinois. Luke Altmaier, highly regarded as a top 5 quarterback in this conference this season. Couple of years starter, he's entering his 3rd year. Over 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last year. And I think he did a much better job of protecting the football as well. Offensive line brings back everybody, and this is a good O-line. J.C. Davis at tackle, Josh Geske, Josh Kreutz, Melvin Priestley, all those guys, all Big Ten players last season. This, I think, is going to be one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten, if not all of college football as well. So if I'm a quarterback and I've got that offensive line returning, I feel really good about that as my building blocks for Barry Lunny Jr.'s offense. But now we get into maybe some of the questions for the Illini this season. You lose Pat Bryant. He was one of the best receivers in the Big Ten last year, 984 yards and 10 scores, 5th in the Big Ten in receiving yards. Zachary Franklin put up over 600 yards and 4 scores as well. You got to go to the portal in these types of situations. Hudson Clement had over 700 yards and 5 scores at West Virginia. Justin Bowick from Ball State, over 300 yards and 3 scores. But I think to really find your number one guy, I think you're going to need some of these returners in this Illinois wide receiver room to be able to step up. That being Hank Beatty, who was just shy of 300 yards last season, Malik Elzy, Colin Dixon. They need to be able to rise to the occasion for this Illinois offense and this Illinois passing attack. I don't think it's going to be as dynamic as it was last year, but if you have a good O-line to protect Luke Altmaier, you have a fighting chance to be able to put up some numbers down the field. Let's talk about their run game. Health has been a problem for Caden Fagan. Okay, when we've seen Caden Fagan play over these last couple of years, man, it's like he's really good. He can be a 1,000 yard. He can be a 10 touchdown type of guy. He can be a beast, but he's got to stay healthy. Like I really like Illinois with this O-line and being able to lean on the run game and balance it with the play action in the pass game. That's a Brett Bielema style of play, like he was known for over there at Wisconsin. But Aiden Lawfrey, over 500 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. He's kind of a quicker scat back type of guy. Khalil Valentine is the young guy that they're really excited about. They're capable, but I don't think that they can fill that bell cow type of role that Caden Fagan can certainly fill this year. There's a lot to love on Aaron Henry's defense, folks. And this secondary is bringing back 2022 vibes. And they're also bringing back everybody from 2024. Matthew Bailey led the team in tackles, 94 at safety. Miles Scott. Xavier Scott had 4 interceptions last year. Caleb Patterson, Torrey Cox at corners. They're all starters last year. And returning that experience is going to be huge. This was an aggressive secondary. They look to force a lot of turnovers last season. Now, you look to these next couple of levels of the defense. They lose Seth Coleman at linebacker, but this is a group that also brings back a lot of experience. Gabe Akis is probably going to be one of the better pass rushers in the Big Ten. He had 8 sacks last year, combined with 74 tackles. Dylan Rosiak and James Kreutz is in there as well. Both those guys had over 55 tackles last season. So, okay, feel really good about the secondary. I also feel really good about this linebacker group, but the defensive line is maybe there's some transition going on there, and maybe there's some question marks, and I don't think it's as good as the linebacker group or the secondary. They lose Dennis Briggs and Tayra Edwards up front. They bring in 4 transfers, including a couple of former Wisconsin Badgers, James Thompson Jr. and Kurt Neal. Carter Hewitt transfers over from Northern Iowa. We know experienced teams get the job done, and I just have a lot of confidence in Brett Bielema. Like, you even look back to last year. I mean, they got smoked by Oregon at Autzen Stadium. There's no shame in that. They played Penn State really tough in a night game in Happy Valley. I think the Minnesota was the other loss as well. This is just a fundamentally sound football team. I think they've got really good coordinators on this team. The schedule shapes up for them where they avoid a lot of the big powers in the Big Ten this year. I think that this is a team, their ceiling, I believe, can be 11-1 this year. I truly believe that. And that if I'm picking number 4 for the college football playoff right now, I'm picking Brett Bielema, the Fighting Illini. Now, once they get there, I'm not sure if they have the roster to be able to make a run, but considering where Illinois was to get to the playoff, that would be a hell of an accomplishment, certainly for Brett Bielema and this program. Speaking of a team that went to the playoff, this was number 4 from the Big Ten last season, and another team that also went 11-1, that being Bloomington's best, the Hoosiers of Indiana. By the way, the Bison mascot is back. Love that. Love that. Kurt Cignetti and IU took the world by storm. Now it's time to prove that last season wasn't a fluke, and Indiana football, not basketball, Indiana football has staying power. I think that this could be a better roster, despite a little bit more of a difficult schedule this season. Curtis Rourke was a great story coming off of an injury, a group of 6 transfer last year from Ohio. So you lose him, but I think they might have upgraded. I think that's maybe the dirty little secret about this Indiana team. Higher floor maybe, starting with Fernando Mendoza as he transfers in from Cal. Threw for over 3,000 yards last season, 16 touchdowns and 6 picks. He was the number 12 overall player in the portal, number 4 quarterback. So he's certainly highly thought of. And then you combine him with Kurt Cignetti, you combine him with Mike Shanahan and the offensive coordinator. I think that's a recipe, and we'll get into why I believe a little bit more in Indiana. Now, they lose their quarterbacks coach, Tino Sinceri, which was a big part of quarterback development when the staff was at James Madison, and then, of course, at IU last season. Now, last year, they had a backfield where they had like 3 good backs and a rotation. No back went over 1,000 yards for Indiana last season, and I expect kind of the same thing this year, the way that this Indiana backfield is built. They lose Justice Ellison. He had 848 yards and 10 scores. Tyson Lawton, 668 yards and 12 scores. So that's 22 touchdowns of rushing production that you're going to lose. But you bring in Roman Hemby from Maryland and Lee Beebe from UAB in the portal. Roman Hemby, that name sounds familiar. 2022 at Maryland, he rushed for nearly 1,000 yards and 10 scores, a big home run threat. Now, his production kind of went down over the last 2 seasons, but he still combined for over 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns during that time. Lee Beebe, a transfer from UAB, as I mentioned, 877 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. Kalen Black, 251 and 2 scores last year. So I don't know who the number 1 running back is going to be. I think that's probably something that the rotation that they're going to have to figure out during fall camp and early in the season in that week non-conference schedule. I'm not the first person to bring that up, but I believe in the depth. I think there's really good depth here in the run game. I think they can have a similar amount of success running the football that they did last season as well. Now, a lot of my confidence in this offense, I've already talked about some parts I'm confident in, but a lot of my confidence, I think, comes from what they return at wide receiver. Now, they lose their 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th leading pass catchers. Miles Price, Keyshawn Williams, Miles Cross, tight end Zach Horton in there as well. But they bring back their top 2 leading pass catchers from last season, an all Big Ten receiver in Elijah Surratt, 957 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. Omar Cooper, nearly 600 yards and 7 scores a year ago. And they went to the transfer portal and got some really good options to supplement this depth. Mekhi Jackson, 745 yards and 5 scores. Jonathan Brady from Cal had 386 yards and 3 touchdowns as well. Man, it's time. It's time to see E.J. Williams step up. He entered the portal mid-season last year. He withdrawed. He's back in Bloomington. He's had some good seasons at Clemson early in his career. If E.J. can step up and you have Mekhi Jackson, you have these guys, this is another deep wide receiver room. Right, this was a timing-based offense that had a lot of wide receiver depth, multiple guys that you could go to. That's going to be the key, once again, to Indiana's success. But I think it's very clear that they have top guys at the top of their wide receiver room. Now, they brought in 2 transfers at tight end, but I'm not sure if they have a Zach Horton type of level replacement over there. Now, when Indiana lost last season, they lost 2 games. They lost to the 2 teams that played for the national championship, Ohio State and Notre Dame. When they lost their games last season, their offensive line crumbled. 3 sacks, 10 TFLs allowed against Notre Dame. 5 sacks and 8 tackles for loss allowed against Ohio State. This offensive line has to be better, and I think it will be better. They returned 3 starters, Carter Smith, Drew Evans, and Bray Lynch. The key cog in this machine is who's going to be the anchor and touching the ball every play. That being Pat Coogan, a center, transferring in from Notre Dame. I think he was their biggest addition. 26 starts over 4 years. He's extremely experienced, the number 5 offensive lineman in the transfer portal. Indiana, they got better opponents on their schedule. Indiana's got to play Illinois. They got to play Iowa. They got to play Penn State. They got to play Oregon. They got to play good teams this year. And those good teams, like Iowa's going to have a good defensive line. Oregon's going to have a good defensive line. Penn State's going to have a good defensive line. If they want to get to the college football playoff, if they want to get to that 10-2 mark, the offensive line has to be able to stand up against some of these Big Ten defensive lines a lot better than they did last season. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Now, when I look at defense, they got 3 studs, 1 at each level of this group that I'm really excited about. Mikhail Kamara, 3rd-team All-American, 1st-team All-Big Ten, 15 TFLs, 10 sacks coming off the edge at defensive end last year. Aiden Fisher is in there at linebacker, 1st-team All-Big Ten. He had 118 tackles. D'Angelo Pons at corner, a 2nd-team All-American and a 1st-team All-Big Ten guy, 57 tackles, 3 interceptions, 9 PBUs. The question going into last year, can these James Madison kids coming over, can they translate to the Big Ten? Yes, and yeah, they certainly can. And I think that these are going to be the building blocks of the defense, certainly for IU this year. They lose Jalen Walker, who had 82 tackles and 10 TFLs next to Fisher last season. Sean Asbury is gone in the secondary. James Carpenter and CJ West. Those are 2 huge losses on the defensive line. Those are going to be, that's one of the biggest questions I have, because I thought the defensive line was pretty good last year, but how exactly are they going to backfill that next to Mikhail Kamara up front on their defensive line? Tyreek Tucker is a JMU kid, played a good amount last year, had 3 sacks, but they're bringing in 4 defensive line transfers that they're hoping can certainly plug those holes. Stephen Daly from Kent State had 5 sacks last season in the MAC. Kellen Wyatt, that's a name that some people might know. He comes over from Maryland. He's a pretty good player in there as well. At linebacker, Elijah Hardy and Isaiah Jones. They each played in double-digit games last year. Hardy had 6 TFLs. Jones had 42 tackles. He was the third leading tackler on this team. In the secondary, Amari Farrell returns over there at safety. I think that this is going to be a good safety. Or a good secondary, excuse me. Jamari Sharp made 3 starts at corner. He's in there. There's 4 transfers that come in to this group as well. So I think defensively, it's going to be like, all right, we know who the studs are at the 3 levels on this football team. We just need to build around solid, dependable play around them. And then we need to let our offense kind of do what they do, put up points, be explosive. And I think that this is going to be an Indiana team that can be in that conversation. Going on the road to Oregon, going on the road to Penn State, obviously going to be difficult. The back half of their schedule lightens up a little bit. The key is going to be those back-to-back Illinois and Iowa games early on during this college football season. All 3 of these teams, I think, have the rosters, the coaching, and everything to maybe make a run for the college football playoff this season. Now it's time to get regional, and let's head out to the West Coast, baby. And it's West Coast Take 2 in Hollywood and Seattle for these 3 remaining West Coast teams, because Take 1 in the Big Ten wasn't maybe their best effort. USC, UCLA, and Washington combined for a 17-19 record in the regular season last year. So all of these teams are certainly looking to take a step up to climb closer to what Oregon did in year number 1 within the Big Ten Conference. We are going to start with the Cardinal and Gold. We are going to fight on with USC to certainly start this one off. This has to be an improvement for USC. Like, man, but it's got to be for Lincoln Riley's sake. If he wants, I know there's a lot of money in his buyout, but if he wants to keep his job and they want to be able to keep and be able to maintain that great 2026 recruiting class, creating a bridge this season to future success is vitally important. The transfer portal was tough on the Trojans. They lost 26 players. They had the 16th best portal class in the conference. Guys like Deuce Robinson, Quentin Joyner, Emmanuel Pranon, Kyron Hudson, Zach Branch are all gone from this USC team this season. So on offense, I think here's where I want to start. You might think, hey, Lincoln Riley team, you're going to start with quarterback. Well, no, not with this one. I want to start with an area where Lincoln Riley, he wanted to give it the stiff arm. It seemed like all year long, and that was the run game. But this is a team that succeeded most last season when they ran the football effectively. Woody Marks had over 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns last season. He was the first 1,000-yard rusher for the Trojans since 2017 when Ronald Jones was able to do that. I already mentioned Quentin Joyner transferred out of this program. He was that backup running back. He's over to Texas Tech. So now you have pretty much most of your significant rushing production is gone. How do you revitalize this room? Eli Sanders transfers in from New Mexico. He rushed for over 1,000 yards and 15 scores last season. He's kind of the lightning. The thunder is going to be Brian Jackson. He showed what he can do during the bowl game. So that's kind of what you're working with the run game. I do not believe that it is as good. This is a running back room and a run game I'd feel a lot better with if Quentin Joyner would have remained certainly in Los Angeles. But for that in the run game, the passing attack has the potential to be really, really good. But folks, Jaden Mayava has got to protect the football. Got to protect the football. He played the last 3 games of the year last year after taking over for Miller Moss. He played pretty well to start against Nebraska, but the last 2 games hit or miss. 7 scores, 5 interceptions. Of course, the 2 pick sixes against Notre Dame that cost him that potential to have that upset, maybe knock the Irish out of the college football playoff at that point. There wasn't a ton of solid Jaden Mayava is our guy like there was with Miller Moss last year. Husan Longstreet, I think, is floating out there. And it would not surprise me to see the great 5-star freshman maybe take over at some point this season. I would anticipate it might not be until later in the season, but I am certainly up to being surprised because I think he is certainly the future of the program at USC right there, no doubt. And we know Lincoln Riley is that quarterback guy. USC might have the best wide receiver tandem in the country. Okay, that's the Big Ten, if not all of college football. Okay, Pro Football Focus ranked Mekhi Lemon as their number 1 wide receiver in the 2026 draft. 764 yards and 3 scores last year. Jacoby Lane, the tall, athletic receiver, 525 yards and 12 scores. Last year at times, it seemed like, there's a game. Okay, Deuce Robinson is having his game. Okay, Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane is having their game, and Kyron Hudson is maybe having a game. There wasn't really a consistent number one guy, but I think now you have that in your 1-2 option with Lemon and Lane at the top, and those two guys are going to be very difficult to defend, certainly for defenses this next season. Now, the depth beyond that is not the best in the world. They went to the portal. They got Prince Strayson. Hope I pronounced that right. He transfers from Boise State. 25 catches, 304 yards, and a score last year. Jay Fair is back. Xavier Jordan is someone to keep an eye out for. Lake McCree has kind of been banged up over there at tight end, so there's some questions with him right now. Joey Olsen is a name to keep an eye on, a redshirt freshman at that position as well. Last year, I think the offensive line, it wasn't great, certainly. I think it was good in the run game. I think it maybe struggled a little bit more in pass protection. Miller Moss took a lot of hits as the season kind of wind down a little bit. They lose 3 starters, Jonah Monheim, Mason Murphy, Emmanuel Pranon. And you look at Pranon, he transfers up to Oregon, Mason Murphy to Auburn. These guys aren't downgrading. Right? They're going to Big Ten programs. They're going to SEC programs. Monheim, right, is going on to the next level. So they're trying to replace that. DJ Wingfield transfers over from Purdue, but there are some questions with his eligibility. He might not be able to go. John Ray Reed transfers from Syracuse. Now, both of those are top 10 interior offensive line guys, but like we said, the eligibility, I think, is a big question. Offensive line-wise, they need Elijah Page to make a big jump this season over there at left tackle. Now, he's a highly recruited 4-star type of kid. You throw him in as a freshman, there might be some lumps, and there was, but he needs to play well, especially if they want to keep these quarterbacks upright this season. I'm not sure about the run game. I think the running back room has maybe taken a little bit of a step down. Offensive line, I'm not sure if it's made any really significant improvements as well. You look to the defensive side of the ball, and I'm a lot more optimistic in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball for USC. This group took a step up last year on defense because there was no other direction, certainly, to go. So, that defensive line, Cam Fountain and Anthony Lucas are back at defensive end. That's a really good pairing. That's a really good pairing, in my opinion. They got a lot bigger with transfers on the interior at nose tackle. How about Keyshawn Silver, a former 5-star? He was transfers over from Kentucky, 6'4", 331 in the middle. Also, Jamal Jarrett from the SEC. How about 6'5", 350? So they got that Big Ten beef that we all know you need in the middle of these defensive line. Devin Tompkins started some game in the interior last year as well. Braylon Shelby at defensive end at 3 sacks. He adds some depth there. Jakeem Stewart, he's a 5-star freak, 6'5", 290. He can play outside. He can play inside. I think he's going to work his way on the football field, no doubt, this season. Eric Gentry needs to pick up where he left off last season due to injury because the linebacker room not loaded with talent. You lose Easton Mascarenas-Arnold off of this defense. He was one of their leading tacklers and one of their leading guys at linebacker. Mason Cobb is another one. Both those guys combined for 107 tackles and 8 tackles for loss last year. So Gentry and Anthony Lucas both got hurt, I think, kind of in the middle of the year. And not having those guys, I think, really hurt USC. So keeping those guys healthy is going to be huge. The secondary is interesting because I love Kamari Ramsey. He represented USC at Big Ten Media Days, and he's over there at safety. I mean, the Big Ten is loaded at safety, but he's really good, certainly. And they got some good transfers to be able to kind of supplement what they lost in that back part of that group. Only Ramsey is coming back as a starter. DJ Harvey from San Jose State. He was the number 15 corner in the portal. I mean, he's all over the field. 58 tackles, 7 TFLs, 2 sacks, 10 PBUs, 4 interceptions. Bishop Fitzgerald from the Power 4 at NC State, number 11 safety in the portal. Same kind of deal. 55 tackles, 7 TFLs, 8 PBUs, 3 picks. All ACC honorable mention. Kennedy Urlacher maybe fit into that nickel spot coming over from Notre Dame as well. So the strength of USC on the defensive side of the ball is going to be that defensive line. So they need to be able to eat. They need that dog work to really kick into gear this year. I think for the defense to continue to improve this season offensively, this is a team that they need to light it up. They need their offensive line to do just good enough so that their quarterback, whoever it may be, can deal the pill to Lemon and Lane, and they can go off certainly this season. Let's talk about that other team in Los Angeles, that being, and that's maybe disrespectful, but let's talk about the UCLA Bruins right now. What I love about UCLA is Deshaun Foster just kept this team fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting last season. They could have rolled over and died during that stretch. I mean, they have LSU during that, Penn State, Oregon during that stretch, but they got big wins against Nebraska, big wins against Iowa a little bit later in the season. Eric Bieniemy is out as the offensive coordinator. In is Tino Sinceri as their new OC. You talk about their defense, it was 4th against the run, 2nd to last against the pass, and there are a lot of departures on defense. A lot of transfer portal movement. They had the 2nd most movement in the Big Ten in the portal, but they had the 5th ranked class in the portal. 34 guys out and 30 guys in to beautiful Westwood. Now, let's start with offense. Any notable thing to talk about? Quarterback, maybe, for example, for UCLA? You thought you had Joey Aguilar coming over from App State, and he was going to be your quarterback, and then the old switcheroo, in comes Nico Iamaleava, and there is a lot of attention, certainly, on him. Now, he's an upgrade, certainly, from where Ethan Garbers was last season. Completed 64% of his passes, over 2,600 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 5 picks. Now, he was good. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, was he great? Was he mind-blowing? Was he elite? I would not put him into that category. But still, he quarterbacked a team that made their way to the college football playoff. Now, run game and defense maybe has something to do with that, with the Volunteers certainly as well. I'm looking forward to the combination of Nico and Tino, and possibly Rico. But Tino Sinceri, as I mentioned, coming over to be their offensive coordinator from Indiana. He's got a proven track record, specifically with quarterbacks, specifically with passing offenses that have been successful. So, you know, I know there's that whole situation was crazy during the spring, but there's going to be a lot of eyes on UCLA. There's going to be a lot more attention on UCLA now than there would have been if Joey Aguilar would have been the quarterback. And I think that they've got a schedule early on in the season that could really see them really notching up some wins and building some confidence. They better hope that Nico is better than Joey Aguilar. Okay, because if they let Joey Aguilar walk, Nico, and it doesn't really maybe pan out, and Joey lights it up at Tennessee, that's not the best look, I think, for this UCLA team right now. I think there's potential for Nico to have a really good season because of also who he's throwing to. Now, you do lose J. Michael Sturdivant, Logan Loya, Maliki Matavao was the tight end. He was their leading receiver last year, actually, 506 yards and 2 scores. Caden Robinson is a transfer. Now, he thought he was going to be playing with his buddy Joey coming over from App State. Recently filed a lawsuit against the NCAA to play this season. He combined, I should say, for over 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns the past 2 seasons. So if they can get him eligible, that will give a big-time boost to this wide receiver room. Quasi Gilmer returns after 345 yards and 2 scores as a freshman. Titus Mokiawa Atamalala, I think I got that one right. 294 yards and a touchdown last season. Rico Flores was injured last season. He played just 4 games. He could be back in maybe September to October or something like that. Like, he's a former 4-star, top 150 guy, started his career over at Notre Dame. And then they bring in guys like a transfer, Mikey Matthews from Cal, who had over 270 yards and a score last year. Jaden Wilson from Arkansas. So, like, it's kind of the formula that they built at Indiana, where it's like, okay, let's spread the field with a lot of options. Let's have a really good quarterback that can distribute the ball to all of these guys, and let's achieve our offensive success certainly that way. Now, the run game, not a strength last year for UCLA, and that's putting it kindly. They were the worst rushing offense in the Big Ten. They lose TJ Harden. They bring in 2 transfers, Javion Thomas and Anthony Woods. I mean, you look at Thomas last year, he led Cal in rushing, 7 touchdowns. Woods didn't play at Utah in 24, but he did really good at the FCS level in 2023 when he was 5th in the FCS in rushing that year. Jalen Berger is also back in this room. So there's some depth, but I think it's going to be more of a complement to the pass game really than anything. Offensive line struggled to start the season. Maybe got a little bit better as this year went on last year. They returned 2 starters, Sam Yoon at center, Garrett DiGiorgio over there at right tackle. They bring in a handful of transfers over there. They got to be good. Got to give Nico time to be able to throw the football down the field against some of these Big Ten defensive line. So let's head over to the defensive side of the football. This is an entirely new group. They had some good players on this team that are going to be playing on NFL rosters this season, like specifically in the secondary. They have 10 transfers alone coming in the secondary. I think that just goes to show you like the type of guys that they lost and the amount of guys that they lost and what they need to bring in, like KJ Wallace and Brian Addison, are out of that group. I mean, Carson Swessinger in the middle, led the Big Ten in tackles, first-team All-American, 33rd overall pick of the Cleveland Browns. Femi Oladejo was a second-round pick of the Tennessee Titans. Like, man, it's a defense that's losing a lot, and it's going to look brand new. Jalen Woods is the only returning player that had decent time, like in the linebacker group, 12 games, 22 tackles last year, but they bring in Isaiah Chisholm from Oregon State. He had 75 tackles last year. I think they're expecting him to play at a high level this year. Uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty, I think, back there in the secondary. Keep an eye on like Andre Jordan from Oregon State, Roderick Pleasant from Oregon, a former 4-star top 100 type of player. They're kind of still figuring out what they want to do with him. Key Lawrence was a safety from Ole Miss, had a couple of good years at Oklahoma, over 100 tackles and 3 interceptions in 2 years combined over there. So a lot of uncertainty on the defensive side of the ball, but I think they just kind of need to hang around with what this offense and how explosive it could be with Nico at quarterback. The back half of their schedule is more difficult, but I mean, they could be 4-0 going into that Penn State game at the Rose Bowl, and there could be a whole lot of cameras, whole lot of lights, whole lot of attention coming to this program, which I think is a really good thing for Deshaun Foster and the Bruins right now. Let's move over to the last team on the West Coast, that being up in Seattle. Let's talk about the Washington Huskies. A little bit of a roller coaster ride, certainly it was last season. Now, they lost both of their coordinators because, family. The offensive coordinator was Brennan Carroll. Okay, so he joins his dad, Pete Carroll, with the Raiders. Steve Belichick was the defensive coordinator last year. Oh, you might have heard Bill Belichick became the head coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels. Jimmy Doherty will take over as the offensive coordinator. He'd been with Jed Fish since he was at Arizona, quarterback coach, passing game coordinator, that kind of guy as well. So there's some familiarity there. Ryan Walters, former Purdue head coach, comes in as the defensive coordinator for the Huskies. So, I mean, are we going to get more like Illinois 2022 when he was the DC there? They fell flat on their face at Purdue. Is it going to be somewhere in the middle? We'll talk about that a little bit later. The strength of this team is the offensive skill positions. Damon Williams at quarterback. You've got, you look at him, a lot of people are pegging him as like this exciting breakout type of player, and I agree with them. Last year when he got on the field, and Will Rogers, of course, started the season, completed 78% of his passes, 944 yards, 8 touchdowns to 1 interception. Okay, so, his mobility allows him to get outside the pocket, make plays with his legs, and he showed, especially during that bowl game, what he can do engineering a comeback to really get his team back into the football game. I'm excited to see what Damon can do this season. I think he's going to be certainly one of the better quarterbacks, certainly in the top half of the Big Ten when it comes to signal callers this season. Jonah Coleman returns off a really good season, over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns in the run game. Denzel Boston, they lose Giles Jackson at wide receiver, but Denzel Boston last year, 834 yards and 9 scores. They get Amari Evans from Penn State out of the portal, 21 catches, 415 yards, and 5 touchdowns at Penn State. Now, the depth at wide receiver beyond those two guys maybe starts to bring up some question marks. Unproven guys, Kevin Green, Rashid Williams, and others need to really step up to provide that depth to have more weapons instead of just those two main guys at the top that the defense could possibly lock into. Last year, the offensive line, it was an issue, certainly to say the least. And they're looking for 2 senior transfer portal additions to really help that out. Carver Willis transfers over from K-State. Gieran Hatchett transfers back to Washington from Oklahoma. Now, Willis started 11 games last season, all Big 12 honorable mention in 2023. Hatchett played in the first 8 games in the 2023 season, the year they won the Joe Moore Award, before an injury kind of held him back as well. So Washington offensively needs to have the offensive line be better. That is a must. If that doesn't happen, you're going to end up with, I think, a lot of the same stuff that you did last year. Number 2, Damon Williams has to give you a level up the ladder in terms of quarterback play, and you need both of those aforementioned receivers to certainly step up and be playmakers on the outside. I'm excited about what the offense can do. Let's head to the defensive side of the ball. Now, Ryan Walters, high highs at Illinois, low lows when he was the head coach at Purdue. Where is he going to be? To me, I think he's going to maybe land somewhere in the middle. All he really needs to put out there defensively is be like, hey, we got really good weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Get us some stops every now and then, right? Be like middle of the road for us, and I think that will really get us in a great position where we can maybe make some plays and maybe hang on in maybe a 38-35 game or a 31-28 game or something like that, possibly down the road as well. Now, Washington loses their top 2 tacklers from last season. Carson Bruner, 104 tackles. Alfonso Tupatala, 81 tackles and 3.5 sacks. But I kind of still feel good about what they have in the middle at linebacker. Tariq El-Ukta transfers in from Washington State, 76 tackles last season. Zaire Alexander transfers in from UCF. He had 68 tackles and 6 tackles for loss a year ago. Russell Davis, Zach Durfee, key players, I think, that need to come off the edge to be able to provide a pass rush to help out the rest of this defense, I think is truly, truly important for them. There's no doubt about that. Both of those guys off the edge have shown flashes within their career. So I think there's certainly something to work with at this level of the defense. It's a largely unproven defensive line with Javon Parker coming off of an injury, played 4 games. Sioti Pepa coming in from Utah, had a great freshman season, maybe not as productive the last 2 years over there as well. They've got the most college football experience really comes from some transfers. Ontario Thompson and Tetayayi Uyunglele, hope I got that right, who played a good amount at Western Michigan and Arizona, respectively, right there. Secondary is probably, one of the better groups. Okay, they lose Thaddeus Dixon in the portal to North Carolina, but they grab the top corner in the portal in Takaria Davis from Arizona. Yet another Wildcat coming over to rejoin Jed Fish. Davis was a second-team All-Big 12 player last season and a semifinalist for the Thorpe Award. Alex McLaughlin is an FCS transfer from Northern Arizona that I think they expect to fill in at safety. He was a first-team All-Big Sky and an All-American at that type of level. So all of that being considered, I truly believe that this is a defense that just needs to hang on. Their offense needs to be very explosive this season, make a lot of plays, and this could be, the schedule is kind of pretty decent. It's not the easiest, it's not the hardest in the world, but I think that this is a team that they have a clear formula of what they need to do to be successful in year 2 under Jed Fish. From the sunshine, the ocean, and the beaches of the West Coast to the heartbeat of the Big Ten for many decades, and that is the Heartland of America. Let's check in with our Heartland heroes in the cornfields of the Midwest. And when you think about corn, you think about the Nebraska Corn Huskers. And that's where we're going to start with these 4 teams. This I also like to call the quad of hate. There's a lot of trophy games. There's a lot of animosity within this group. I love talking about these 4 teams together. Over the past handful of seasons with the Nebraska Cornhuskers, I haven't shied about the expectations that I have each and every single year. It seems like these last couple of years where Nebraska, I felt, has had good rosters, right? They've had good play on the defensive side of the ball. They've had some things that can come together on the offensive side of the ball, and I've picked them to win 8 games. I've picked them to win, 9 games. I've picked them to kind of be that team that a lot of people out there expect them to be. And I haven't shied away from that, and I haven't regretted necessarily picking them to finish that high, but I've kind of gotten burned the last couple of years, haven't I? And a lot of people are looking at year 3 of Matt Rule, when he's made that jump at Temple, when he's made that jump at Baylor, that this could be the year at Nebraska for them to get it done. Now, their schedule kind of plays out pretty well. I will say that if they can bring it all together. But maybe like a lot of people, I'm not drinking as much Kool-Aid this offseason as I maybe have in years past. I think it's fair, like the biggest thing that needs to happen for Nebraska is Dana and Dylan need to click. Dana Holgorsen, of course, the offensive coordinator that took over very late in the process when they demoted Marcus Satterfield. That was long overdue, by the way. He's still on the staff, BTW. Then they brought in Dana Holgerson very late, kind of off the street in this process. It was a little bit of an odd situation, but it seemed to click against Wisconsin a little bit later on during the season. But this is something where you need that Dylan Raiola second-year jump. You got a 5-star quarterback for a reason, and it's not to have 13 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. And that's what Dylan was like last year. Over 2,800 yards passing for the legacy at Nebraska. Now, here's the thing about Dylan. I thought for a true freshman, he started off pretty well. He started the season last year with 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions throughout the first 5 games. But his final 8 games, 4 touchdowns against 9 interceptions. Look, when you throw out a true freshman quarterback, no matter how talented they are, there are going to be peaks and there are certainly going to be valleys as you kind of learn throughout the process. And then you go through a coordinator change and things that kind of happen throughout the season for Nebraska. You can understand why there would be bumps in the road, certainly right now. But this is like, we need to start to see the consistently great level of play from Dylan Raiola for this team to achieve what some people out there think that they possibly could achieve. And that's that 8 wins, that's that 9 wins, and so on and so forth in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, I think there's optimism that the Huskers could be better this season because of what Dylan has throwing, who he is going to be throwing the football to. Now, I say that, but I also want to make sure that I say that there are some weapons that are being lost from this wide receiver room. Your 2 leading receivers last year, Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair, no longer there. Your tight end, Thomas Fedoni, is no longer there. As well, Jalen Lloyd is no longer there. He transferred out. Like, those 4 guys made up 56% of Nebraska's receiving production a year ago. So what happens? You got to go to the portal to be able to kind of backfill on that type of production that's lost. And they did a pretty good job, I thought, with the 2 receivers that they brought into the transfer portal. Dane Key from Kentucky, 715 yards and 2 scores last year. Put up a lot of production there in the SEC. And Isaiah Hunter coming over from Cal, 578 yards and 5 touchdowns as well. I think those are going to be 2 of the main targets that Dylan Raiola is going to look to fairly consistently, I think, throughout this season. 2 other guys that are returning in this wide receiver group, Ja'Cory Barney had over 400 yards receiving last year. Janarian Bonner, guys showed some flashes, maybe not as consistently because of the receivers that I already was mentioning that were in that group. I think that were on the field a lot more than those young players out there, but I think you're expecting big-time jumps for both Ja'Cory and Janarian to really be those guys to fill out this wide receiver group and really be those explosive weapons down the field where this can be a passing offense that can be really good. And I think like it needs to be, because that's like historically Dana Holgerson, I know he's had some good rushing offenses as well, and we'll get to that. But I mean, Dana has been a guy that where they've thrown the ball, air raid, type of deal. Throughout history as well there. Now, despite losing Fedoni, they've got decent depth, I think, at the tight end position. Heinrich Harburg is now going to be moving over there full-time. Luke Lindenmeyer. Carter Nelson was a 4-star, highly recruited tight end out of Ainsworth, Nebraska. He was at wide receiver, actually, last year. Now they're moving him back to that natural spot at tight end. I think the expectation, we'll see. I think Harburg's a pretty good athlete out there, and he's going to be involved certainly. But I think with Carter, I think that's the future NFL draft pick that I think is going to get going, whether it's this year or whether it's next year. I think you would really like to see Carter in his second year in the program really take that elevation. I think that you almost expect to see from a player like him that was as talented as him when he came out of high school, certainly as well. Now, that's all well and good, and I think there's certainly some players to throw to, but man, offensive line. It needs to be better in Lincoln. This is a group, you go late Scott Frost era, you could probably go the whole Scott Frost era, and then now the early Matt Rule era. It's been injuries on the offensive line, it's been inconsistent play on the offensive line, and I think it's really hampered this defense and maybe halted, or offense, I should say, and really halted the progress, certainly as well. Gunnar Gotola, Justin Evans, Henry Latovsky, all are returning from last year, and they were all in that starting lineup. And here's the thing, you throw out guys like Turner Corcoran, Teddy Prohaska I mean, you talk about injuries, and Teddy Prohaska is that guy that's been injured multiple times throughout his career. But those guys, I think those are guys that you would expect to also be in that lineup as well. There's decent talent, I think, in this room with those guys that are returning out there. It's just you got to keep them healthy. That's been the thing. And that was the thing kind of last year that really came back to bite Nebraska a little bit. But not only do they have those returning players, how about some transfer additions? And you got some pretty good ones. Former 5-star Elijah Pritchett transfers over from Alabama. When he came out of high school, he was the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. Started 11 games over 3 years for the Crimson Tide, so maybe not exactly living up to that level that he was coming out of high school. The hope is that he can plug into this Nebraska system over there, maybe possibly at right tackle, and he can maybe start to live up to those expectations that he had coming out of high school. They also got a proven commodity from Notre Dame in Rocco Spindler. He was the number 6 interior offensive lineman, in the transfer portal. 23 starts at right guard for the Irish. And we know how good Notre Dame has been on the offensive line last year and that great rushing attack, and really, these last few years from Brian Kelly bleeding over, of course, to Marcus Freeman. So you factor in the transfers, you factor in what's returning, and you're like, okay, they got some depth. They got some guys that can maybe push the other side of the football around, and you can create some wins. You can create some advantages at the line of scrimmage. You can keep Dylan Raiola upright, and I think that's maybe the most important thing of it all, certainly. Let's talk about the run game, because this is an offensive line. They got, like I said, they got some good size to them, and this is an offensive line. We'll see how good that they are going to be in terms of run blocking and paving ways for these backs. Dante Dowdle, leading running back from last year, transfers out. He's off to Kentucky. He led the Huskers in rushing last year, 614 yards and 12 touchdowns. Emmett Johnson, your time is now, my man. Okay, you are going to be the guy, and there is not a lot of depth behind him. Emmett Johnson last year rushed for nearly 600 yards. I mean, Ramir Johnson's gone. Gabe Irvin Jr. is gone. Like the last couple of years, there's been like 3 or 4 guys every year in this Nebraska backfield, and they just don't have that type of depth. I think, the running back position. So this is the Emmett Johnson show. And I say it's about time because, man, we've seen some big-time flashes from him, and we've seen some big-time promise from him. I believe that he can be a 1,000-yard rusher in this offense. I truly believe that, specifically if that offensive line stays healthy and they play really well, and you get back to playing that Nebraska football in the interior that fans of the Huskers are certainly used to seeing. So offensively, comes down to the connection between Dylan and Dana, and it comes down to really the health of the offensive line in terms of their success. Let's head over to the defensive side of the ball. Now, defense, this is a group that lost a lot. Okay, this is a group and they lost their defensive coordinator as well, Tony White. He's off to Tallahassee over there at Florida State. Now, John Butler was on staff. He takes over now as the defensive coordinator of this group. The first group that I want to focus on is the defensive line and the linebackers, really. The front 7. Let me just list off some names that are no longer there anymore. The 2 guys in the middle, Nash Hutmaker and Ty Robinson. Man, those guys were the heartbeat of this Nebraska defensive line over the last couple of years. Now, I know he didn't play a ton, but Prince Waluman Mielen transfers out to Ole Miss. He was very highly regarded in the portal. I think he was probably on track to be a big contributor this season, but he's no longer there. John Bullock and Mekhi Bayer, their top 2 linebackers from last year, they're gone. James Williams coming off the edge, he's gone as well. So they got to rebuild this front 7 this year. I think like Cameron Lenhart, former 5-star recruit, and Elijah Judy are guys that really need to step up and step up in a big way. But I think one guy that Nebraska fans are really excited about, former 5-star recruit Williams Nwaneri transferring over from Missouri. Like, you look at Lenhart, you look at Nwaneri, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm feeling good about what Nebraska could be coming off the edge with some of these pass rushers, considering some of the players that they lost in the transfer portal. But here's the deal. In the interior, they lack size, especially considering the size of the Polar Bear and Ty Robinson that they've had the last couple of years. So if you have a team with a really big offensive line, a team that's going to be physical, running the ball between the guards, running the ball in the middle, how are they going to be able to hold up over a 4-quarter game against that type of football team. Let's move to the linebacker group. I mentioned the losses that they have here, and I'm not, although they lose their top two linebackers there, I think there's some pieces to work with within this group. I think one player, a transfer that's coming in that I think Nebraska fans should be fairly excited about, Marcus Watson-Trent. He put up some gaudy numbers in the Sun Belt the last couple of years. He was the 2024 Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year. He had over 100 tackles the last 3 years, and over 120 tackles in the last 2 seasons. I know it's a lower level of football, but sniffing out that many plays, I mean, that's good at any level. Dason McCullough is a guy that also is coming in. He started his career at Indiana, transferred over to Oklahoma. He's kind of like a safety linebacker, kind of hybrid type of player as well. So that was, I think, a big addition to this Nebraska team. Javen Wright, Vincent Shavers, Willis McGahee, I think are some good options in there. So I think there's some decent play. I think there's some, I think there's some depth as well in this room as well. Now, I mentioned Bayer and I mentioned Bullock. They're not shooting up high up an all Big Ten list by any means. So I think there's a potential that this group could be better at linebacker this year if some of these guys really rise to the occasion. Now let's look at the secondary. It's a very experienced group. For as much as you lost on the defensive line, for as much as you lost at linebacker, I mean, secondary, you got everybody coming back pretty much except Tommy Hill. And Tommy Hill, you had to play without him due to injury last season as well. Deshaun Singleton and Marcus Buford are back at safety. Syer Wright is back at corner. Malcolm Hartzog is back at that nickel kind of spot within this Nebraska defense as well. Now, it's something that everybody looks at returning production and thinks like, oh, if you've got 80% returning production, or if your entire position group is coming back, it's automatically a great thing. Nebraska's pass defense, I think at times was maybe a little bit hit or miss last season. So sometimes when you bring a lot of guys back, how much have you really improved? We're going to find that out, I think, about Nebraska's passing defense certainly this year. But you have guys that have played Big Ten football. You have guys that have certainly seen a lot in terms of coverage and defending some passing concepts within this conference as well. I mentioned before they have a schedule that's fairly favorable for them. I think this year, an early season game against Michigan, I think is going to go a long way to determining exactly what we see for Nebraska. Dylan and Dana, that thing's got to click. If you want to see the jump, if that doesn't click, hey, the rest of the thing is maybe all for naught for Nebraska this year. But if that does click really at a high level, this could be a very exciting team to watch, I'm sure, this season. Speaking of exciting to watch, speaking of anticipation, I am pumped up about the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Okay, I'm ready to go. This has been a steady team and a consistent team under PJ Fleck. They've won 8 or 9 games in 4 of the last 5 seasons. Now, if you're a fan of Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan or Oregon or somebody like that, you'd be like, so? That's a bad year for us. At a place like Minnesota, I'm not going to quite say that's statue worthy, but that is a high level of consistent play and good seasons that a place like Minnesota hasn't maybe seen a lot throughout throughout their history since they were a blue blood back in the 60s or whenever that was. But there's a lot to be excited about this team. PJ Fleck said at Media Days, he says, I want our team to be delusional. I want our team to be able to shoot for the sky. And I saw a newfound energy from him in Vegas, which I love to see. He maybe calmed down a little bit the last few years, but he's pumped. He's ready to go. And I get pumped for the maroon and gold this season. Quarterback, let's talk about them because there's a lot. When I go through and talk about Minnesota, I'm going to talk about a lot of positivity, I think, through a lot of the team and what they got coming back. But quarterback is a question. You lose Max Brosmer, over 2,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 picks last year, but you're replacing him with a redshirt freshman. Now it's a redshirt freshman that a lot of people in Dinkytown really, really like in Drake Lindsey. He's got a tall, NFL pocket passer type of frame. People are saying that he's got some of the most arm talent they've seen in Minnesota in a while there. But it's still his first year as a starting quarterback. He's still a very young kid. I don't know how much you can expect from him to really play outstanding football. in these first couple of parts of the season. I think he'll get better, certainly, as the year goes on. But this is a PJ Fleck team, okay? And I think the positive thing for Drake Lindsey is the PJ Fleck team plays smash mouth football. They like to run the football, and this is one of the Big Ten's best running back duos, folks, here. Of course, Darius Taylor. Darius Taylor, if he's not a household name, he should be. You should know who his name is. He's rushed for over 1,700 yards and 15 touchdowns in his career at Minnesota. That's 2 years. He's actually yet to have a 1,000-yard season. Fun fact, he came 14 yards short of that last season. We've been talking about him, for a couple of years here now, and it's just like, yeah, it's kind of weird that he hasn't gotten to that point, to be honest with you as well. A.J. Turner and Cam Davis transfer in to provide a lot of depth. Turner from Marshall, 864 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. Cam Davis was really good at Washington in 2022, where he had over 500 yards and 13 touchdowns. Injuries have kind of plagued him a little bit, but if he can get back healthy and he feels strong yet again, I think he can really provide a role in the depth in this running back room. We saw Marcus Major kind of do that with the Gophers last season as well. So, young quarterback. You got a run game that you can lean on. That's one of the better running back tandems in the conference. Okay, that's good if I'm a young quarterback where I don't feel like I have to go out there and be Superman from day number one. Now let's talk about this offensive line a little bit. There's been a very good offensive line culture these last handful of years at Minnesota, putting guys into the National Football League. But there are some questions in this group, like questions at quarterback, questions at offensive line. I will admit, I don't love that. I don't love that right off the bat. Phillip Daniels transfers to Ohio State. You lose Quinn Carroll and Ariante Ursary. We talk about some of these offensive linemen that Minnesota has had these last few years. Ursary is maybe the best of them all. Last year, he was the Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year, 2-time All-Big Ten selection, and a second-round draft pick as well. Greg Johnson anchors the group at center. He started all 13 games last season. But like I said, there's a lot to replace in this group. Okay, how good is this offensive line going to be able to be to pave the way for this run game and to be able to protect Drake Lindsey? The last thing you want is for protection to break down consistently, especially early in the season, especially with a young quarterback. So protection is going to be immensely important for Minnesota. Now, despite that, Drake Lindsey, lean on the run game, and you got some good wide receivers to throw to. And that's even after they lost Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer, Minnesota's top 2 receivers last year, who combined for 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns a year ago. Lamecki Brockington is back. He's certainly been there for a few years. He's a veteran within this room. But they had 3 names in the portal. Logan Loya, a veteran, shifty guy coming in from UCLA. He's going to work out of the slot. Javon Tracy is that burner that comes up from Miami of Ohio. He had over 800 yards and 7 scores last year in the MAC for the Redhawks. And then Malachi Coleman. Okay, this is the dark horse, maybe the diamond in the rough for the Gophers right now, because he was a 4-star recruit, top 100, 125, 150, that type of range. He went to, Lincoln East High School there. He went to Nebraska, right, the hometown school right there, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. He's got a tall, athletic body frame, and we saw like some flashes of him with the old Big Red, but man, if they can get him playing at a high level, and you've got Coleman and Loya and Tracy and Brockington, and throwing Christian Driver in there as well. There's some guys to throw the football to, and I think they're going to be able to spread the ball around. But Malachi Coleman, I know Javon Tracy, I think could certainly be a really good player. Coleman might have the highest ceiling of them all. Maybe not this year, but certainly when all of these guys' career have come to an end as well. So, offensive line, quarterback, maybe a little bit concerns, but I really do like the skill positions for Minnesota's offense. So, the Gophers lose another the defensive coordinator. Of course, it was Joe Rossi. Now it's Corey Heatherman. But I don't think that's going to set Minnesota back. It hasn't really set them back in the past. Danny Collins is finally going to get his opportunity for Minnesota. Okay, he was a secondary coach, I think all the way back to PJ's days at Western Michigan. So he's been with PJ for a very long time, and now he's going to get his chance. And if there's one position group that, considering what we've seen out of Minnesota, that I would want elevated, it is the secondary coach, because Man, is this becoming safety U real quick. I mean, they lost Justin Wally. He was over at corner. But, man, I love this secondary this year for Minnesota. Of course, we know about Antoine Winfield Jr. We know about Tyler Nubin and those guys. And Coy Parrish. Esco, Minnesota, baby. If you haven't been, go give it a visit sometime up near Duluth. But he is one of the best weapons, and I think overall, all-around players within college football. There is a reason why Ohio State pressed as hard as they possibly could on signing day when this happened. I am so happy that this kid stayed home. I'm so happy, and PJ just beams about him every time he talked about him. Coy Parrish had 5 interceptions last year. He just trotted out from Esco, Minnesota. And if you know anything, I cover high school football here in this state. They're not playing at the highest level. They're not playing 6A football here in Minnesota. Let me just say that. So he went from that level of football all the way to the Big Ten, and he just looked like an experienced player. I mean, he looked like one of the best players on the field every single time. His athleticism is off the charts. His intelligence is off the charts as well. PJ Fleck said at Big Ten Media Days, he'll be on special teams, he'll be on defense, and he's going to be on offense. Travis Hunter of the Big Ten. Anybody, if you don't know the name Coy Parrish, you're going to know the name Coy Parrish by the end of this season. He will be a household name nationally, I guarantee it. That's how much I believe in what Coy Parrish can do. And boy, you have him as a weapon on offense as well as what he can do on defense. Man, PJ just stays up at night probably thinking, how can I get the most out of this kid? Because he can put victories on the board with his play. No doubt about it. I have no doubt about that in my mind right now. Now, Kerry Brown flew under the radar, just a little bit last year due to Coy's performance, but he was kind of another young guy, but he's back out there. Aiden Gooseby started 8 games in the secondary, and they brought in Jaden Bowden from the portal, a good FCS guy as well. So this is a group I think that's going to be able to force some turnovers. This is a group I think that's going to be able to cover well. It's just another year in the secondary out there in Minneapolis. The front 7 loses players like Cody Lindenberg and Danny Strago, but I think these groups are still good. They return starters like Jalen Logan Redding and Devin Eastern on the defensive line. Maverick Baranowski is back at linebacker. Anthony Smith had a 6-sack season. Jackson Howard played high school football here in the Twin Cities at Robbinsdale Cooper. Highly recruited. He went to LSU, and now he's back at Minnesota. Didn't play as much last year. I think this year is a year where they're expecting him to try to achieve that level of play and that hype maybe that he had coming out of high school. Rashawn Lawrence comes in at defensive tackle after a 9-sack season at the FCS level. Devin Williams played in all 13 games with 2 starts at linebacker. As well, Jeff Roberson transfers in at linebacker from Oklahoma State. 58 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks as well. So I think when you look at all 3 levels of the defense, there's a lot to be excited about when you look at Minnesota's defense as a whole. Really, I think there's a lot to be excited about with their team as a whole. Like their 2 toughest games are both on the road, at Oregon and at Ohio State. They get a ton of their 50-50 games at Huntington Bank Stadium, and that is going to be a big advantage for Minnesota. If you're looking for a team to be a surprise team, to maybe make their way to 9 wins, 10 wins, maybe a playoff berth, Minnesota. Minnesota's that team. They are a very easy over bet on their win total right now. I am confident in these Golden Gophers. Now, that's my confidence. Maybe now I'm going to flip the other way. And I'm not the only person to feel this way about this upcoming team. Let's talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. For the first time in over 2 decades, Wisconsin was not bowl eligible last season. Boy, have things really changed around Madison under Luke Fickell. Of course, he came in, uprooted Wisconsin's culture, uprooted Wisconsin's DNA, and now you're sitting there where this team just has not shown signs of improvement under Luke Fickell. Like, this is a program that they have digressed under Fickell. And they weren't at a great starting spot, right? We saw the program kind of declining when Paul Christ was the head coach when he got fired in the middle of that 2022 season as well. Starting on offense, they get rid of good riddance to Phil Longo as their offensive coordinator. They bring in Kansas OC Jeff Grimes to be the offensive coordinator in that same position. He's running the show now on offense, and they are promising to be a more physical team, kind of get back to what makes Wisconsin. Luke Fickell said at media days, hey, we're going to be more, trying to be mold into the more traditional style of Wisconsin. I'm like, yeah, maybe a little bit, maybe a couple of years too late or something like that, but they're gonna try their damnedest certainly this season. Now, like Badger teams of old, it starts up front on the offensive line. Okay, 3 returning starters on this group: Joe Brunner, Jake Renfro, Riley Mullman over there at right tackle. Now, here's the thing. I was feeling really good about this Wisconsin O-line because they also had a guy that they got a couple of recruiting classes ago by the name of Kevin Haywood. They beat out Penn State for him at left tackle. He tore his ACL during, would that be spring ball? Yeah, he tore his ACL during spring ball. That is a big loss because now they're going to have to find somebody else. And I wasn't overly confident in the depth on the offensive line for Wisconsin, so we'll see how that all certainly shakes out as well. Running backs, offensive line running backs, like this is old school Wisconsin football, right? That's how we're starting things off here in this, talking about the Badgers. It's young, it's talented, despite losing their leading rusher, Tawi Walker. Now, Darian Dupree got a lot of run as a true freshman, 317 yards and a score last year. Dylan Jones did not get as much run, but I thought Dylan Jones was the better running back, and he was the more highly rated running back coming out of high school than Darian Dupree. So that's the combination, okay? You're looking for those two to really look like Wisconsin running backs, start to look like Wisconsin running backs this season. If you have an offensive line that's at the very least good, and if you get this run game getting back to, I'm not saying you got to be Monty Ball, I'm not saying you got to be James White, I'm not saying you got to be Melvin Gordon. Those are extremely high expectations for Wisconsin. I'm just saying you got to get back to a group that you can rely on consistently, and you can win the line of scrimmage, and you can break out big runs and create big plays within the run game. Cade Yakimelli is a back that's shown some promise, 274 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's kind of maybe a smaller, more shifty type of guy as well. Okay. Badgers have had terrible luck at quarterback, injury-wise, these past couple of years under Luke Fickell. Of course, Tanner Mordecai. Last year was Tyler Van Dyke against Alabama. And what did we learn those last 2 years? Braden Locke ain't the guy. This ain't going to work. So he's out, and they had to retool their entire quarterback room as well. Via the portal, they bring in first Billy Edwards coming over from Maryland. 5th in the Big Ten in passing last year, over 2,800 yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He's the second returning passer in the conference behind only Drew Aller. They also brought in Danny O'Neal as insurance from San Diego State. He had over 2,200 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions last year. So let's talk about Billy a little bit. I think there were games where you saw that he could sling the ball down the field, like the Minnesota game for Maryland last year. He turned the football over a lot, made some bad decisions, albeit against a very good secondary out there as well. But Billy, you just need to be reliable. You need to stay healthy. I don't think that they're going to put too much pressure on Billy Edwards to be this great guy, to win them a bunch of games, put the team on his shoulders, that kind of thing, because that's not the offense that they're trying to run anymore. I think they're trying to really invest once again into the run game in what makes Wisconsin great. But I think Billy is he's a good enough quarterback that if your run game is really good this season, he's going to be able to be good enough to really work with what you got throwing the football to over at wide receiver. So that's what I want to talk about next. And I think there's some good options. Now, you lose Will Pauling. He enters the portal, and he's off to Notre Dame. But Vinny Anthony is back. He was leading the team in receiving last year. 672 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's that speed guy, that burner that can certainly get over the top. Trech Kekahuna, quick guy in the slot, 3rd on the team in receiving last year. 339 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, Jaden Ballard transfers in from Ohio State. He was one of those 4-star recruits. I mean, top 150 type of guys, and he just buried in the best wide receiver room in the country. So I think the hope is be okay, yeah, he's still a good player. He's just not at that Ohio State level. Okay, if he can be a really good wide receiver at Wisconsin, he can be the number one guy potentially on this offense as well. DeKal Crowdis transfers in from Hawaii, 302 yards and 4 touchdowns in his lone season over there. So there isn't as much depth in the wide receiver room, but I don't know if Wisconsin maybe needs as much depth in the wide receiver room, to be brutally honest with you, because of what they, I think, want to do in the run game and tight ends. We'll talk about tight ends here in just a minute. Why don't we talk about tight ends right now? I think it's very clear that is a more emphasis and an importance on the tight end position than there was in Phil Longo's offense. Now, you had Tanner Kogel a couple of weeks, maybe what seemed to be that. He ended up transferring out then during the spring portal period, and you got Lance Mason from Missouri State. Now, Mason, 590 yards, 6 touchdowns at Missouri State last season at 6'4", 240. So I think it was very clear to me that they wanted a great receiving tight end in this transfer class, and they were very motivated to go out and get one. They eventually did. They had one, and now they end up with another one. So I think the tight end room is going to be more important, certainly within this offense. Tucker Ashcraft is back, as well as Jackson Aker moving from running back over to tight end. Maybe he kind of slides into that fullback type of role as well. We've seen him play that role certainly before. So I think this is a Wisconsin offense that's going to get back to being physical at the line of scrimmage, winning that battle, controlling the time of possession, working off that play action, getting some easy looks down the field, and having some of your guys create certainly that way. Let's look to the defensive side of the ball. Mike Tressel returns as the defensive coordinator. Kind of like last season, though, I'm not sold on this defensive line. And I think they're depending on a lot of these transfers to be able to hit. This is a defensive line that did not create a lot of pressure. Put a lot of pressure on their secondary to be able to cover for a long period of time. They lose James Thompson Jr. and Kurt Neal to Illinois. Elijah Hills is out of eligibility. Now, Ben Barton does return. He started every game at defensive end. You've got Charles Perkins from UT Martin. You got Parker Peterson from Tulane. You got Javier Suggs, from LSU. So there's maybe 2 of those guys. They got to pop. They got to pop this year for this defensive line, I think, to be better than it was last season. Now, there's some optimism in the secondary. Despite losing an all-timer, possibly, in Hunter Wohler back there at safety, Ricardo Holman is easily the leader of this group. He's been great the last 2 years. He was targeted 33 times, over 319 coverage snaps last season, the fewest of any corner in the nation with 300-plus coverage snaps, which makes a lot of sense, because he burst onto the scene in 2023 and had 7 interceptions. So I think teams are going to be like, okay, we're going to throw it to the other side of the field now based on what our 2023 film tells us about Wisconsin. Preston Zachman will likely be a player at safety to fill Wohler's shoes. He's got some experience. Now, Nizer Forkerween and his eligibility, it's kind of just hanging out there. It's kind of a black cloud over this Wisconsin thing right now. They ruled him ineligible, the NCAA did. Wisconsin is filing an appeal. This is big. I think if they get him back, I really like this secondary, but we'll see if Forkerween is going to indeed play in Madison this year. Austin Brown, I think he kind of played a nickel spot. He's back, 51 tackles last season. So there's some talent. There's some experience certainly coming back in the secondary as well. You look to the linebacker room, Jake Chaney and Jaheim Thomas are gone, but Christian Allegro really started to come on late in the season. 66 tackles. He was second on the team last year. Also 5 tackles for loss. That was also second on the Badgers a year ago. I think a guy that really needs to step up is Darrell Peterson, coming out of that outside linebacker. No, he started games over the last 3 seasons, but now it's time for him to take that big jump forward and really be that pass rushing presence. Wisconsin needs to get after the quarterback to help this thing out. We know all about their schedule, folks. We know all about their schedule. This is a team that could win 4 games. This is a team that could win 7 or 8 games, depending on how much they develop, not only as a team and personnel, but also as a coaching staff as well. I think they want it. The goal is you got to get back to bowl eligibility. You got to get to 6 wins, and you need to show some improvement. You need to show some progress. We haven't seen that under Luke Fickell. Going to be interesting to see if Wisconsin can do that with Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, and Illinois, and all these good teams on their schedule. We're going to finish out our trip in the Heartland by maybe visiting the state that is more Heartland than any of them. That is the Iowa Hawkeyes. The model of consistency is Kirk Ferentz in the Big Ten. He enters his 27th year of coaching in Iowa City, and it's his 14th year with Phil Parker by his side as the defensive coordinator. All right, get rid of the jokes. I hope all of the jokes about Iowa's offense are out of your system, because they should be. Because I think you got to start throwing some respect on one Tim Lester. You got to start throwing some respect, I think, on what this Iowa offense could be this season. I think that this could be the best Iowa offense since Nate Stanley was running the show in 2019, and they were putting up half 100 in a bowl game against the USC Trojans. Now, big reason why I feel that way, Mark Gronowski. We know about the quarterback play. Spencer Petras, Cade McNamara, Brendan Sullivan, Jackson Stratton, right? It hasn't been good. We're not setting a high bar here, folks. But Mark Gronowski is just... I think he's going to be one of the highest impact transfers in the entire conference. One of the biggest difference makers out of the portal. 49-6 record at South Dakota State. A 2-time FCS All-American. A 2-time national champion. A Walter Payton Award winner as the best player out there in the FCS. He has just done it. He has seen a lot of football. He is he's an all-timer, really, at the FCS level. And for Iowa to get him was extremely important to elevate the level of the quarterback, because you certainly over these last handful of seasons couldn't say to the quarterback, all right, we got ourselves a close game. We got 2 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock. Go win us the game. Go move the ball down the field. You couldn't do that. I think now you can do that. You can put more faith in the quarterback position with Mark Gronowski running the show in Iowa City. And I think he's set up for success. I really do this season, because of this might be the best offensive line in the Big Ten. In America, I don't know. It's certainly up there. It's one of the best as well. This was a Joe Moore Award semifinalist last season. Bo Stevens, Logan Jones, first-team All-Big Ten center, Jennings Dunker, second-team All-Big Ten tackle, are all back, and they're going to plug the holes. It's just so many things you can rely on with Iowa. A great offensive line is certainly one of those things. Now, despite losing one of the best running backs in college football last year, Caleb Johnson had over 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns. This offensive line is another reason I think, to get excited about the run game and what they can do paving the way for some of these guys. Kamari Moulton and Jazz Patterson expect to form a great 1-2 tandem. They combined for 769 yards and 5 scores last year, and that was behind a 1,500-yard back, which I think is impressive. Jazz Patterson is kind of a lot like Caleb, where it's a bigger guy. He gets running downhill, and he's really tough to be able to bring down. Now, over the last few years, Iowa's wide receiver room, they've struggled to get open. And to be honest with you, it just hasn't been very talented. But I think this year, what they have coming back at wide receiver, look, none of these guys won't probably be all Big Ten guys. Okay, let's just say that right off the bat. But I think the fact of the matter is they give them a fighting chance in the pass game. Jacob Gill, over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. He's back. He led Iowa in receiving last year. Reese Vanderzee, 176 yards and 3 touchdowns in 9 games a year ago. He was a freshman, right? So I think he could make a pretty sizable sophomore jump. Sam Phillips transfers in, a rocket, a speedster from Chattanooga. He had 818 yards and 3 touchdowns. Caden Weegan was a weapon on special teams. I think he's going to be more of a factor on the offensive side of the football, certainly this season. And tight end, what do we want with tight end? It's always great. It's always great. But if you have that wide receiver room really looking good, I think that's where things really start to make a jump. And now you're starting to catch up with where the rest of the team has been. Addison Ostrenga, Zach Ortworth are back this season at tight end. Now, I said a lot of good things about the offense for Iowa in the trenches. Now I'm going to say a lot of good things about the defense in the trenches. This is a team that is built from the inside out, and that is Midwestern Heartland heroes, Heartland football, certainly built as its best. The defensive line is 2 returning starters, Aaron Graves and Ethan Herkett. Max Llewellyn was also in there as well, 8 tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks last year. Iowa returns. Those 3 guys that I mentioned were the 3 leaders in tackles for loss and sacks. So this is a group that is returning their top havoc wreakers from a year ago. Deontay Craig and Y.A. Black are the guys that are gone. Now, you look to the linebackers, you look to the secondary, big shoes to fill. Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, gone. I mean, those are all-conference, all-American type of guys. Sebastian Castro at the cast position, he's gone. Jamari Harris is also gone, certainly as well. In the secondary, here's the thing. You have guys that have started games before, that have a handful of experience before. Deshaun Lee started 9 games last year. TJ Hall started 7 games last year. Of course, Xavier Wampa started at strong safety the last 2 seasons. I think, we've looked at Riley Moss. We've looked at Cooper DeJean. We've looked at Sebastian Castro, some of these top Iowa defensive backs. I think the next one in that line is Xavier Wampa. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Cohen Entringer, all these guys played double-digit games last season, so they have experience. You look to the linebacker group. I mean, you got 3 seniors that have waited their turn for this role. It's like typical Iowa stuff. Not the highest recruited guys in the world, but they learn, they develop behind some of these great linebackers that Iowa has had. Seth Benson and Jack Campbell, remember those guys before that recent pair that I talked about? Carson Shar, Jaden Harrell, Jackson Rethroth is a trio to certainly keep an eye on this year at linebacker. Harrell and Shar, they've played almost every game the last 2 seasons, so kind of like the secondary. There's experience here. It's a Phil Parker defense. It's Iowa culture. It's Iowa football. I expect the defense to be really good this year. I expect quarterback to be a lot better this year. I expect the passing game to be better. And we'll see if the 2 guys in the backfield can pave the way for a really good run game. I think there's some optimism to be had if you're a fan of the black and gold. I now realize I've been talking for a very long time, and maybe this isn't as condensed as I would like it to be, so I will try to kind of go a little bit quicker and maybe condense things here a little bit more as we finish things up in our last 5 teams. There's 2 teams that I want to talk about here right now, and they're just kind of like somewhere in the middle geographically. Maybe they didn't fit to some of those groups that I was talking about before, and that's the Michigan State Spartans and the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. I want to first start with the green and white of Sparty when I talk about these things. And we knew that this was going to be a steady climb. That's how Jonathan Smith built that thing over at Oregon State, and he was just going to take it year by year by year. You had a 1-game improvement last season, going from 4-8 to 5-7. Came really close to maybe getting to that bowl eligibility during the season. But starting on offense, Aiden Childs. So everybody raved about him coming over from Oregon State. He was a highly recruited guy, and he's kind of the golden boy a little bit when it comes to the future of Michigan State football. And last year, inconsistent as a first-year starter, I think it's putting it kindly. Over 2,400 yards, 13 touchdowns, but also 11 interceptions. Similar stat line to maybe what Dylan Raiola did in his first year as a starter. But now 2 years of eligibility remain for Aiden Childs, certainly right now. So he's got to find a way to be more consistent. He's got to find a way to be better. And I think his talent level is going to continue to raise Michigan State. As Aiden Childs goes, I think the Spartans will go, certainly, as a football team, as they'll continue to go up, maybe stay the same, maybe go down a little bit. But the main focus for him has to be protecting the football. There is no doubt about that. Now, you kind of pivot to something that Aiden Childs is supposed to be able to lean on, and that being the run game. Run game was solid. Certainly last year, but Nate Carter and K'Ron Lynch-Adams are gone. They combined for over 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. Last year, it's very simple. Michigan State needs a new cast of characters in the backfield. They're really going to lean on Elijah Tautoliver, who is a transfer coming in from Sacramento State at the FCS level, had over 900 yards and 7 touchdowns a year ago. I'd also probably expect Brandon Tullis. He's a little bit more of a power back to be involved. He's been in this program certainly for a couple of years as well. So we'll see if he can kind of be involved in those short yardage situations to really get this run game going. But those are 2 good running backs that you have to replace within this Michigan State offense. Offensive line was something that was maybe blamed for some of the troubles that the Spartans had last year. They lose Tanner Miller on the front. They lose Luke Newman on that front as well. And you go to the transfer portal. There was a decent amount of positions where Michigan State was pretty heavy in the portal. Offensive line was certainly one of them. Matt Golban from Wake Forest started every game in 2024. He was an all-ACC honorable mention guy. Luke Vinich from Oregon State. He had 2 starts last season, so he's not ultra experienced, but I think the guy that everybody is looking to I think maybe play maybe one of the biggest impacts of these new offensive linemen is Connor Moore, an All-American. He's also was a freshman All-American early in his career at Montana State, a top 20 offensive tackle in the portal. So if he can do a better job than what Michigan State maybe had last year, then certainly that this can be a better team and what they can do protecting the passer and both running the football certainly as well. But, when you bring in that many transfers in the transfer portal, it's tough. It's tough because those guys they've got to gel together. Very curious to see if that's going to happen in East Lansing, Michigan. I'm really looking forward to what Nick Marsh can do for the Spartans this year. I cannot wait to see him play. I mean, as a true freshman last season, 649 yards and 3 touchdowns. He certainly emerged as the number 1 target. He was a leading receiver for Michigan State last season. Now, Montori Foster is gone, but they bring in 4 portal additions at wide receiver. And they're, the top 3 guys are all from the group of 6 level. So we'll see how this production certainly translates to that higher level. But, a couple of these guys were certainly high production guys. Chryson McCarthy from Kent State, kind of a smaller guy, 5'10", 168, 711 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. Amari Kelly from Middle Tennessee, 864 yards, 4 touchdowns. Evan Boyd comes over from Central Michigan. He had 306 yards and 2 touchdowns a year ago. And then they bring back Jack Velling, right, who was great at Oregon State last year, 411 yards and a touchdown. I think they want the production and need the production of Jack Velling, I think, to take more steps forward, to be honest with you. So we'll see if that's able to happen with them. But I think there's going to be targets for Aiden Childs to be able to throw the football to. It just comes down to what's the protection going to be like? Is he going to be able to make better decisions, not turn the football over? Is the run game going to be able to equal kind of that production that they had last year with those 2 guys coming in? 12 transfers in on the defensive side of the football. I think the defense it's fairly deep. I think you got a good amount of guys returning. I mean, a lot of guys I think are in the secondary. But you got defensive line, linebackers, specifically Wayne Matthews, Darius Snow, Jordan Hall, are all coming back at the linebacker position for Michigan State. And look, it's a Joe Rossi defense. I believe in what Joe Rossi has done throughout his career, specifically at the defense he was able to build at Minnesota. Like, everything about Michigan State football is kind of the slow build. Everybody kind of wants that instant gratification, that thing that just flips instantaneously. That's not what is happening here at Michigan State. They're building, they're trying to retain players, and they're certainly trying to make those incremental steps, because I believe that this is a Michigan State program with resources. I think the coaching staff is really good also at MSU, that they can kind of put a good program together once this thing is built up year 2, year 3, and so on and so forth. But Michigan State, they're one of those teams that I would kind of watch out for as maybe being a team that could surprise a couple of people, because if Childs clicks, if these pass catchers click, and the defense takes another step forward, the schedule is fairly manageable, where this thing could be pretty good for the old green and white. Let's talk about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Greg Schiano has just been he's just been a solid coach. I mean, they're working off back-to-back bowl bids, even though they lost to Kansas State in their bowl game last year. When you talk about consistency, when you talk about hard-nosed football, when you talk about all of those good things that you look for from a program that maybe doesn't have the most resources in the conference, that's what Rutgers has been able to get out of their program. Now, the main storyline that I have when I talk about Rutgers, no Kyle Monangai. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He's an all Big Ten type of running back, great player. How are you, because that's been a big part of your offense. You got Ethan Kaliakmanis coming back yet again at quarterback in Piscataway, New Jersey. I feel better. I will say this. I feel better about what they have at wide receiver this season. So I think they're going to improve in terms of the passing game of the pass catchers. Look, I'm not I'm not crazy about Ethan Kaliakmanis. I think at this point you kind of get what you get. You got what you got. He's going to have his ceiling, I think, as a quarterback. But he didn't have the worst stat line in the world last year. But, he's not going to be a guy that's going to throw for 3,000 yards and 25 touchdowns. Like, I think you just need to have that expectation kind of going into this thing for the Scarlet Knights as well. So, big thing is a run game. Ja'Shawn Benjamin is in that room. C.J. Campbell is a Group of 6 transfer from FAU that was highly productive. That transfers into that room as well. Like I've said before, this is a team I believe in. I think that they've got some good returners as well on the offensive line. So if you have a returning quarterback, you have a fair amount of guys returning on the offensive line. A lot of times things can kind of mesh in around that. But we've just been so used to Kyle Monangai carrying this Rutgers football team. We just don't know what it's going to be like outside of that. So that's going to be, I think, the interesting thing to really look at for Rutgers. Rutgers last season had a very experienced defense, but statistically, the defense wasn't very good. Now you lose some of those guys, and there's some transfers that they got to supplement to be able to get in here. We'll see how many of these transfers click. Look, Rutgers, top 5 transfer class in the Big Ten. They were really good within the transfer portal. I really like Dariel Jabome at the linebacker position for the Scarlet Knights. I think he stepped in. We had the injury to Mohamed Toure last season, and then he ends up hitting the portal this year, so he's out of Piscataway up front. They lose a good amount of guys up front on the defensive line. So we'll see, can they take a step forward, even having lost what they lost? I think they're depending. Rutgers, I think, specifically on defense, is depending on a lot of transfers to click. And sometimes relying on that is maybe not the most friendly thing out there, and it can be sometimes a little bit hit or miss. Rutgers also needs to be talked about as having a difficult schedule. I know Wisconsin has a much different schedule, but I think Rutgers is kind of in that conversation to be like, okay, it's not the easiest in the world this year. So them getting to bowl eligibility for a 3rd straight year, gonna be a little bit challenging. But as I said before on this channel and this show, for some reason, I just believe in them. For some reason, I just believe in Greg Schiano right now. Let's kind of flip in. Let's talk about teams that are looking up. Now, these were the bottom 3 teams in the Big Ten last season. You had Purdue that was just completely at the bottom of the barrel, and I feel bad for the Boilermaker fans and what they kind of had to endure. Their only win was against Indiana State last year. I mean, you have Northwestern, you have Maryland. Those were the bottom 3 teams. And I kind of look at these teams this season, and I'm not sure how optimistic I am for these teams to be able to get out of the cellar this season. Let's start first with the Purdue Boilermakers. Now, you got a quarterback battle there between Ryan Brown and Malachi Singleton as well. So Malachi Singleton transfers in from Arkansas. So we'll see exactly what he can do. But Ryan Brown, we saw him kind of, he can run around. We saw him play ball a little bit in that game against Illinois where they were able to certainly do some things and hang around and make that a close game. But this is like Barry Odom going into his first season there. How about 57? These are crazy numbers. 57 transfers out of the program. 54 transfers into the program. I've never seen it. Did Colorado have those types of numbers? I can't remember. But those are insane numbers. Okay? Here's the thing we need to preach about Purdue this year. Patience. Double P. Purdue patience. This thing, I know you look across the state, Bloomington, Indiana, your old Oak and Bucket rival, and you saw what they were able to do. But that's not going to happen here. I think you need to preach patience with Barry Odom. I believe Barry Odom can be a good coach at Purdue, man, but you need to allow time for this thing to be able to build up. There's no question about that. Now, you look to the backfield, and there aren't many guys. There aren't many familiar names here on the Purdue Boilermakers, but Devin Mockabee has got to be that guy for Purdue, no question about it this season. 692 yards, 4 touchdowns, crazy legs, as they call him. So he's got to be a guy that kind of gets back to that form that he had a couple of years ago. I think it was close to 1,000 yards rushing as well. They've got Malachi Thomas, who transfers in from Virginia Tech as well in this room. Now, when we take a look at the pass catchers that Brown or Singleton are going to throw the football to, I mean, you got a lot of transfers in this room. A lot of transfers. Michael Jackson, remember him from USC? He's in there. Denylon Morissette is the guy who was on this roster last year, 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, Charlie Ross, Chancey Magwood, I mean, E.J. Horton. I mean, it's completely new. Everything is completely new. And, like, I could sit here and list off names until I'm golden black in the face. But, you know, a lot of people out there, to be honest with you, they're not going to know a lot of these names. And it's so weird with, like, how Purdue played last season. Because I look at some of these transfers that transferred out of the program. Dylan Thieneman's going to Oregon. Max Clare is going to Ohio State. Will Helt is going to Clemson. Like, they're going to programs that are going to probably be in the playoff this next year. And you think to yourself, like, how did this happen with Ryan Walters? Look, I know the whole roster wasn't built with guys like that, but man, there were some good players, great players even, on this team a year ago. It's, man, you just want to scratch your head, and how was this allowed to happen? But, you know, there are just so many new players certainly on this team. CJ Nanali is somebody on defense that I would keep an eye on. He's a pass rusher. He comes over from the MAC. He had 6 sacks last year. I believe he was over at Akron. But, you know, it's just so many new players on this Purdue team. How are they all going to gel together? I think if they get to 3 wins, that's an accomplishment, I think, for the Boilermakers next season. Let's talk about the Northwestern Wildcats. I think out of all of these teams on this list, every single one of these teams, these 3 that I got in front of you right now, I think this is the one where I'm like, if someone's going to get out of the basement, I believe it is the Northwestern Wildcats, because Northwestern is just, they're just that anomaly in the Big Ten. When you think they're down, when you think they're not very good, when you think like it's just, man, it's going to be another bad Northwestern year, they find a way. They find a way to put it together. Ryan Braun has kind of proven that a couple of years ago, right in that first year where, I mean, nobody expected them to maybe win a game, a couple of games, whatever, and they just went out and they put together an 8-win season. I think the thing with Northwestern is we want to find out which direction this Cats team is really going, because last year was not a good year. They brought in a new offensive coordinator last year in Zach Lujan, and the quarterbacks last year were not good. Jack Lausch, who is now out of the program, he's focusing on baseball. I mean, Mike Wright, it was just bad quarterback play last year. And the thing about Northwestern is the year before that in 2023, they were flinging it around the yard with Ben Bryant. And Brendan Sullivan was in there as well, but Ben Bryant was doing his thing. You had Bryce Kurtz on the outside. You had A.J. Henning. You had guys that could catch the ball. They could be fairly explosive. Wide receivers, we'll get to that in just a minute. I don't know if they have the guys to be able to continue to be explosive, but they have the quarterback. It's kind of an anomaly. We're not sure which direction. We want to know what direction Northwestern is going as a program. We also want to know what direction Preston Stone is going to go in as a quarterback. I mean, a couple of years ago at SMU, he's lighting this thing up. He's putting up some really good numbers. And last year, not so much. Gives way to Kevin Jennings, and Kevin Jennings leads SMU to the college football playoff. If Northwestern can get a quarterback, that Preston Stone, that can truly fling the ball around and throws the ball with a lot of confidence, this could be a team to certainly watch out for this season. I like a couple of running backs that they have in their room. Cam Porter, he's a guy that's been around forever. I think he was on that 2020 team that went to the Big Ten championship, 501 yards and 6 touchdowns a year ago. Joseph Hyman and David Braun said this during media days. He's an electric guy. When he gets the ball in his hands, I think that's where you want to find your explosiveness this season. That's where you want to find your electricity. Now, he only had 257 yards and 2 touchdowns a year ago, but just whether it's in the pass game, whether it's in the run game, Northwestern needs to find a way to get this guy the football, because he can be explosive and really create some big plays down the field for them for this upcoming season. Now, the thing is for Northwestern, like I said, don't have a ton coming back at wide receiver. Griffin Wilde is somebody that I think they're really relying on to maybe a transfer that comes in and makes an immediate impact. I mean, last year, 71 catches, 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns over at South Dakota State. Of course, Zach Lujan, the former offensive coordinator at South Dakota State. So maybe there's a little bit of a connection there. Outside of that, there's not really a lot of production. So if the Preston Stone to Griffin Wilde connection can be, maybe that can click. Maybe that's the explosiveness that you need to be able to look for down the field for them coming up this season. You know, the defense is something that, like, the reason I think I'm optimistic maybe about Northwestern is they got a pretty good defense. They got really good depth in the defensive line. Aiden Hubbard is back after a season where he had 6 sacks. Last season, Najee Story is back in the middle of that defensive line. Now, they certainly lose a couple of guys. R.J. Pearson, Jalen Pate are a few of those guys that they lose last year. But Richie Haggerty is somebody that's going to be coming back off the edge as well. We'll see if he gets a little bit more go this season. But I think there's good depth on the defensive line. I look to the linebacker position. Mac Uline is going to be back, where he had 60 solo tackles last season. Yanni Karlaftis is someone that transfers over from Purdue that I think, kind of given a starting role, that he can be a pretty good player. So I think that, once again, I think there's decent players out there. And then the secondary. Now, I know they lost Theron Johnson from last year. Then all Big Ten corner. He transfers out to the University of Oregon. But once again, I think that this is a solid group. And there aren't a ton of, there's, I think, only a couple of transfers within this group. So this is a group that's kind of been around for a little bit. This is a group that's, it's a little bit on the younger side. But we'll see if some of these guys in these first opportunities can be good for them this season, and then they can progress on this defense. There's just, I'm not saying it's the whole team. There's little parts of this thing. Explosiveness of Joseph Hyman, Wilde coming in at receiver, Preston Stone at quarterback, Mac Uline at linebacker, where it's just like little pieces, and if they can build around it, maybe that's going to be enough for them to maybe get back to a bowl game. I think this year will really determine where Ryan Braun, former Milwaukee Brewer, David Braun is going to go in his career in Evanston, Illinois. All right, folks, we are going to wrap things up, and we are going to talk now about the Maryland Terrapins. You know, Maryland was kind of that team when Talia Tagovailoa was in there at quarterback. Like, this is, you could get him, notch him in for a really good September. You could notch him in there for like 7 wins, 6 or 7 wins consistently, go out, win a bowl game. And that was kind of the route. And like, that was like a pretty good situation that Maryland was in with Mike Locksley at quarterback, or Mike Locksley as the head coach of this program. Now things feel a little bit different. Last year felt a little bit different with Billy Edwards at quarterback. Billy Edwards transfers out of this program. And this seems to me that Maryland might be taking a little bit of a downturn. Right now. I'm not sure. This year is going to be a big defining moment for Mike Locksley. Can he truly win without Talia as his quarterback? I mean, I looked at the quarterback position. They bring in UCLA's backup from last year, Justin Martin. I mean, he had a decent game against Penn State last year, but didn't get a ton of action. Now they're really relying on Malik Washington. Okay, he's going to be a true freshman quarterback, 4-star, like a top, depending on what service you look at, top 5, top 10 quarterback in last year's recruiting classes. This is a situation where Martin starts the season and Malik Washington kind of takes over maybe like midway through the season. I think that's a little bit interesting to see how that dynamic is all going to work, because a lot of Maryland fans very excited about what Malik Washington could certainly provide in the future. I'm really excited about Nolan Ray, a quick running back at 5'11", 215. He ran for 374 yards and 2 touchdowns last year, but now it's kind of his time to really step up big into that role within this team on the Maryland Terrapins. Maryland is kind of a team where you could kind of rely on what they had at wide receiver. They for a couple of years there, they kind of just rolled over really good player. And once again, I feel like this team is just maybe dropping off a little bit. Octavian Smith is there. Shalik Knotts is in there as well. Like, there's not a ton of returning production You know, you have Octavian Smith with 315 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. Knotts with 161 yards receiving last year. So you don't have that really big-time playmaker returning on this Maryland offense, but maybe somebody is going to be able to step up within this room. I look to the defensive side of the ball. Like, the secondary has always been that group where Maryland is able to put guys into the NFL draft. I mean, Jalen Husky is coming back at corner. Dante Joyner, he transfers in from Arkansas State. We'll see that there's some anticipation certainly with him as well. But I kind of look around on this roster, and I think the issues are going to be the issues. I think like the defense is, I think, going to continue to be an issue for Maryland. I think the offensive line could continue to be an issue for the Maryland Terrapins, and we'll see where that leads this team this upcoming season in the Big Ten. Folks, we did it. We did it. We have come to the end of this absolute marathon of a Big Ten football preview. Now it's time to kick things off. I will be back in time to start previewing week 1 for this college football season in college football's greatest conference. Whew. Marathon complete. So until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.